Chapter 46-62. The black dragon roared in the air, and a terrifying draconic aura swept out in all directions. Its enormous aura seemed like it wanted to devour the heavens and earth. Nie Tian's eyes trembled uncontrollably as he sensed the dragon chi in the air. 9 Candle Dragon. He was certain that Shangguan Hong possessed the dragon bloodline of one of the 4 great ancestral dragons, the 9 Candle Dragon. The 4 great ancestral dragons, the 9 Candle Dragon, the 7 Fiend Abyssal Dragon, the 5 Yang Wing Dragon, and the Grand Sorcerer Frozen End Dragon. Back then, Nie Tian had met a senior of the dragon clan, Old Ancestor Wu Ming, and learned about the 4 great ancestor dragons from him. Moreover, Old Ancestor Wu Ming told Nie Tian that his mark of the ancestral dragon was slightly different from ordinary ones. It seemed to be formed by the fusion of 2 kinds of ancestral dragons. These 2 kinds of ancestral dragon's mark were the Candle Dragon's mark and the Winged Dragon's mark. Therefore, when Shangguan Hong unleashed the power of the dragon race's bloodline and transformed into a giant dark dragon, Nie Tian could immediately tell that he possessed the bloodline of the 9 Candle Dragon. Moreover, Nie Tian concluded that Shangguan Hong's dragon vein also had ancestral dragon marks, and he had at least 5 of them. According to Old Ancestor Wu Ming, possessing 2 or 3 traces of the ancestral dragon was already considered a peak talent of the dragon clan. Shangguan Hong possessed more than 5 ancestral dragon marks. One could imagine how powerful his dragon vein was. So this is your true power? Wan Minghai was not afraid of Shangguan Hong, who had transformed into a dragon. He only frowned slightly, seemingly curious. Roar! At that moment, the gigantic dragon of darkness roared. Dragon chi emanated from its body. Like a raging wave, it surged through the void and turned into a boundless might that pressed down on Wan Minghai. The immortal seal under Wan Minghai's feet circulated continuously. Immortal runes surged out and turned into an immortal rune shield that blocked the pressure of the giant dragon. Bang! However, in the next moment, the huge dragon swung its claw down, and several rays of cold light pierced through the air. The celestial inscription shield shattered, and Wan Minghai was sent flying. Holy Venerate! Upon seeing this, Nie Tian's heart sank, and he cried out in alarm. The power of the 9 Candle Dragon was simply too terrifying. Even someone as strong as Wan Minghai could not face it head-on. Looks like I'll have to use some tricks in this battle. Wan Minghai steadied himself. His eyes shone with sharpness and excitement. Nie Tian was relieved to see that Wan Minghai was fine. From the looks of it, Wan Minghai was only fooling around earlier and had not used his true strength. Roar! Immediately after, the black dragon pounced over again. Its huge body was as fast as a beam of light, leaving behind a dark trail in the void. A dragon's breath tore through the air, and a terrifying dark aura filled the air. The surrounding heaven and earth instantly became dark, as if it had fallen into an eternal night. What terrifying power! Nie Tian was tens of thousands of meters away, but he could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the dark dragon breath. It even reminded him of the dragon clan's taboo, the Emperor's Karma ruins. Wan Minghai's eyes narrowed slightly in the face of the dark dragon's all-out attack. He did not dodge, but instead charged forward. Wan Minghai's body was extremely fast. With every step he took, a celestial seal appeared in the void. In the dark space, it was like a lotus of light blooming one by one. It dispelled the darkness. Boom! In the next instant, the black dragon descended. Wan Minghai's body blossomed with lotuses of light, and the space around him rumbled. Violent tremors caused huge waves to surge up into the sky, after which endless ripples spread out in all directions. Wan Minghai faced the black dragon head-on, withstanding the force of the attack, but his body was like a mountain, not moving at all. Even the lotus of light around his body was undamaged. On the contrary, under the deterrence of the lotus of light, The dark aura around the black dragon weakened, and even its body became smaller. The people of the Three Extremes sect looked at the scene in front of them with their mouths agape. Could it be that even if their sect master unleashed the power of his bloodline, he would not be able to fight against Wan Minghai? Nie Tian was also shocked by the scene in front of him. The lotus of light formed by Wan Minghai's celestial power did not look powerful, but it was able to fight against the 9 candle dragon head-on. It was too terrifying. Moreover, the aura of the lotus of light was one with Wan Minghai. It seemed to be a power that came from the depths of his bloodline, somewhat similar to a warrior's origin spirit. Nie Tian was right. The lotus of light that Wan Minghai used was called the 9-color lotus, and it really was a celestial essence. The celestial essence was one of the 3 immortal roots of an immortal. It was equivalent to a warrior's origin spirit. Wan Minghai was actually taking a great risk by using the celestial essence to fight against Shangguan Hong. This was because the celestial essence was the power of an immortal's root. Once it was damaged, it would directly affect the foundation of the immortal Tao. It was not an exaggeration to say that if the 9-color lotus could not stop the 9 candle dragon, Wan Minghai would instantly become a cripple. Celestial spell, celestial lotus purification. At this moment, Wan Minghai spoke calmly. Suddenly, the layers of the 9-color lotus around his body bloomed, releasing rays of colorful halos that spread like ripples. Hum, hum, hum. The light of the celestial lotus spread layer by layer. Every time it touched the 9 candle dragon, the latter's dark aura would weaken a little. The 9 candle dragon is being suppressed. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he was extremely shocked. The seemingly ordinary little lotus of light could actually suppress the 9 candle dragon. It was too terrifying. Everyone else was also shocked, and many began to panic. The sect master's black dragon seems to be suppressed. Its aura is weakening. That light lotus is so terrifying. It can actually weaken the black dragon's power. Is the sect master going to lose this battle? Everyone discussed, and many people involuntarily retreated. When the light of the celestial lotus spread over, they felt as if they could not breathe properly. It was extremely uncomfortable. Roar. The 9 candle dragon's power became weaker and weaker. It roared in the void, trying to break free. However, the light of the celestial lotus was like shackles that prevented it from escaping. Soon, the darkness around the 9 candle dragon became weaker and weaker, and its body rapidly shrank. Like a reverse transformation, the huge body of the black dragon turned back into a human in the blink of an eye. Shangguan Hong's body was covered in blood, and his face was a bloody mess. He looked extremely pathetic. Who are you? How can you be so strong? Shangguan Hong's body shook uncontrollably, as if he could not even stand properly. You're not weak either. It's just a pity that you met me. Wan Minghai smiled faintly, and then his figure moved, appearing beside Nie Tian. In his opinion, this was just a battle, not a battle of life and death, so there was no need to kill Shangguan Hong. Lord Saint, how are you? Nie Tian felt that Wan Minghai's aura was a little unstable and asked softly. It was obvious that using the celestial soul was also a great burden for Wan Minghai. I'm fine. Let's go. Wan Minghai took a deep breath and smiled faintly. The two left under the watchful eyes of the people of the Three Extreme sect. Lord Sect Master, are we just going to let them go? After a long time, when the figures of Nie Tian and Shangguan Hong had completely disappeared, a martial artist of the Three Extreme sect came forward and asked, "Inform the sacred protector that he has to come personally." Shangguan Hong's face was sinister as he said in a deep voice. Now that things had developed to this stage, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Protector had to take action personally. Chapter 46-63 Heavenly Martial Sacred World, Hanyuan City, Wanyuan Pavilion's branch. On the square outside the gate 2 figures landed. They were Wan Minghai and Nie Tian. After leaving Heaven Martial City, Nie Tian found a safe place and released the 9 superbs, letting them run for their lives. After that, he and Wan Minghai set off for Hanyuan City. After a long journey, they finally arrived at the branch of Wan Yuan Pavilion in Heavenly Martial Sacred World. According to Xuedeshang, if the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was still in Heavenly Martial Sacred World, it was very likely to go to the secret place of Wan Yuan Pavilion, the Five Kings Valley. If Nie Tian and the others wanted to enter the Five Kings Valley, they had to be led by the Wan Yuan Pavilion. Elder Xue, let's go in. Nie Tian let Xuedeshang out of the 9 superbs and prepared to enter the branch of Wan Yuan Pavilion. Xuedeshang looked at the empty square and could not help but frown. He said doubtfully, in the past there would be a large number of array masters gathered in this square. Why is there no one here today? It is indeed a little strange here. Wan Minghai looked around and said in a deep voice. Nie Tian looked around and nodded slightly, but he still walked to the Wan Yuan Pavilion. Since he was already here, even if there was a mountain of swords or a sea of fire in front of him, he had to go through it. The 3 of them entered the main hall of the branch of Wan Yuan Pavilion. Strangely, the main hall was also empty. Looking around, there was no one. Did something happen to the Wan Yuan Pavilion? Xuedeshang frowned. He had a bad feeling. However, the Wan Yuan Pavilion was different from the Heaven Martial Sacred World. It was a great force that could be found in every sacred world. The 3 extremes sect should not dare to be an enemy of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. Is anyone here? Nie Tian was anxious. He did not care much and shouted directly. His voice echoed in the main hall, but there was no response. This is really strange. Xuedeshang frowned even more and prepared to enter the inner hall. Who are you? The 3 of them came to the entrance of the inner hall. Just as they were about to enter, they heard a voice behind them. The 3 of them turned around at the same time and saw a middle-aged man in cyan clothes looking at them coldly. This middle-aged man looked very ordinary, but he was able to appear behind them without them noticing. It was very strange. I am Xuedeshang, an elder of the Heaven Martial Association. Our president is a good friend of your pavilion master, Qing Qi. Xuedeshang didn't dare to be rash. He bowed to the azure-clothed man and said respectfully, "From the Heaven Martial Association?" The azure-clothed man raised his eyebrows and disdainfully said, "I heard that the Martial Heaven Association was exterminated by the 3 extremes sect. You are all survivors. Did you come here to seek protection?" "You can say that." Xuedeshang's old face was a little awkward. He nodded and said, "We are here to go to the Five Kings Valley." Five King Valley? The green-robed man smiled cold. He walked forward and asked, "Do you know what kind of place the Five King Valley is?" "I heard that the Five King Valley is a secret place of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, so I hope that you can accommodate us and let us in." Xuedeshang felt that the green-robed man's aura was extremely strange. He felt even more strange, but he still said respectfully, "Since you know that it is a secret place of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, why should I let you in?" The green-robed man retorted coldly. An extremely strange aura surrounded him. Poison! In an instant, Nie Tian reacted and shouted in a low voice, "Who exactly are you?" The green-robed man's aura was strange and his entire body was emitting poison. He shouldn't be from the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. It's too late for you to react now. The green-robed man's lips curled up into an evil smile. He slapped forward with his palm and instantly, poisonous gas exploded. Like a tsunami, it engulfed the entire space. Careful! Wan Minghai saw this and stepped forward. The imprint under his feet activated again and instantly, the poisonous gas dispersed. The green-robed man's poisonous gas was dispersed, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he laughed. His eyes were like sharp blades as they locked onto Wan Minghai cold. "I couldn't tell that you are a strong cultivator. I also couldn't tell that you are so poisonous." Wan Minghai smiled and gestured for Nie Tian and Xue Deshang to hide behind him. Nie Tian let Xue Deshang enter the 9 superbs, and he retreated to the side. My name is Qingren. In the heavenly martial sacred realm, they call me Myriad Poison Venerable. The green-robed man introduced himself and said with a smile, You want to enter the 5 Kings Valley, but unfortunately, you are too late. I have already killed all the formation masters of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. You killed a branch of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion alone? Nie Tian's face sank when he heard Qingren's words, and he asked in a low voice. The Myriad Yuan Pavilion was considered a first-rate force in the heavenly martial sacred realm. Although the branch in the heavenly martial sacred realm was not strong, it definitely had strong cultivators protecting it. Moreover, it was protected by a formation. It was definitely not easy to fall into the enemy's hands. If Qingren killed all the formation masters of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion alone, his strength might not be any weaker than the sect master Sanji. Are you surprised? Qingren chuckled. His eyes flickered with a strange dark green color as he said, To others these formation masters might be a little troublesome, but to me, the Myriad Poison Venerable, these so-called formations are nothing. Why did you do this? Nie Tian saw a deep darkness in Qingren's eyes, and he could not help but be furious. The person in front of him had killed innocent people indiscriminately, but he said it so casually, as if he did not care about human lives at all. I was asked to do so. Qingren smiled faintly, but his eyes were filled with a sharp coldness. The heavenly Tao sacred pavilion? Nie Tian's eyes darkened and he asked in a deep voice. Qingren was not from the Sanji sect. The reason why he attacked the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was probably because there was a bigger force behind it. And the only force that Nie Tian could think of was the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. I didn't expect you to be so smart. Qingren smiled and said, However, smart people do not live long. So today, all of you will die here. Is that so? Wan Minghai's lips twitched into a cold smile. Then, he sensed something and his expression changed. Holy Venerable, are you okay? Nie Tian sensed that Wan Minghai's aura was strange and he asked anxiously. Wan Minghai forced himself to hold on and shook his head slightly, but his face was already extremely embarrassed. Humph. Qingren smiled evilly and looked at Wan Minghai. He said, My demonic flower poison is colorless and odorless. It can kill an ordinary sky martial arts divine ancestor instantly. Even an expert at the peak of the sky martial arts realm can only last for a short while after being poisoned by the demonic flower. However, you are different. You are not a martial artist, but an immortal. So, I slightly changed the poison of the demonic flower. Even an immortal like you cannot withstand it. You actually know about the immortal Tao. Wan Minghai endured the pain in his body, but his face had already turned black and green. He had never expected Qingren to be able to tell that he was an immortal. Nie Tian was also taken aback for a moment, his heart filled with shock. It seemed that the Myriad Poison Venerable in front of him had an extraordinary background. Chapter 46-64. Nie Tian hadn't expected Venerable Myriad Poison Qingren to know about the immortal Tao and recognize that Wan Minghai was an immortal with a single glance. Just who are you? Wan Minghai forcefully endured the pain of the demonic flowers gnawing at his bones. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he spoke in a deep voice. There are only a handful of immortals on the Immortal Qi continent who are at your level. Qingren completely ignored Wan Minghai's question. He smiled faintly and said, There's a hint of demonic intent in your immortal force. Let me make a bold guess. You should be the saint sovereign of the heaven-punishing cult, Wan Minghai. You. Wan Minghai's eyes widened when he heard Qingren mention his name. He froze for a moment before roaring, Just who are you? Don't panic, I'm not done yet. Qingren, on the other hand, was calm and composed. A faint smile hung from the corner of his mouth, as he stared at Wan Minghai with a playful gaze. He smiled and said, Wan Minghai, as far as I know, your identity is not as simple as the heaven-punishing Saint Venerable. What do you mean? Wan Minghai's eyes narrowed. The anger on his face was instantly replaced by panic. Off to the side, Nie Tian's expression also flickered. He hadn't expected Qing Ren to know so much about the immortal Qi continent and Wan Minghai. What surprised him even more was that Wan Minghai's identity seemed to be extremely unusual. He was clearly hiding something. You're Nie Tian, right? However, at this moment, Qing Ren suddenly shifted his gaze to Nie Tian and asked with a faint smile. Nie Tian nodded without saying anything. He had a premonition that Qing Ren's next words would definitely surprise him. The Saint Sovereign came to the all-heaven sacred realm with you, right? Qing Ren's lips twitched as he continued asking. Nie Tian nodded again without saying anything. The mighty heaven-punishing Saint Sovereign, a peak expert of the immortal Qi continent, came to the all-heaven sacred realm because of you. Don't you find it strange? Qing Ren asked with a smile. Nie Tian could not help but frown, and his expression became cold and solemn. Back in the heavenly extermination cult, Wan Minghai released Mo Rushi and the others very casually. He even let Nie Tian leave with the Ring of Judgment. He even personally followed Nie Tian back to the All Heavens just to save Nie Fan. At that time, Nie Tian also had doubts in his heart, but because he was worried about Nie Fan's injury, he did not think too much about it. Now that Qing Ren had reminded him, he felt that something was wrong. As the heaven-punishing Saint Venerable, Wan Minghai was by no means a kind-hearted person who loved to help others. In that case, could it be that Wan Minghai had ulterior motives for following Nie Tian? Nie Tian, don't listen to him. Wan Minghai was not a fool. He naturally knew what Nie Tian was thinking and hurriedly shouted. Qing Ren laughed and said, Nie Tian, you're a smart person. You should know very well that someone who can reach the position of the heaven-punishing Saint Venerable is not someone easy to deal with. He's so attentive, tireless, and willing to follow you. Is it really that simple? Myriad Poison Saint, I didn't expect that in addition to your shocking demonic flower poison, your poison that attacks the heart is even more sinister. Wan Minghai's eyes were bloodshot, and he almost cursed out loud. Saint Venerable, I just said that your identity is not as simple as the heaven-punishing Saint Venerable. Qing Ren's expression was the same as usual. With a faint smile on his face, he enunciated 4 words clearly, Yuan Haigen. Yuan Haigen. Hearing this name, Nie Tian's expression suddenly changed, and his expression was overflowing with horror. What did Qing Ren mean? Could it be that Wan Minghai was from Yuan Haigen? Nie Tian was no stranger to Yuan Haigen at all. Back then, before he entered the all-heaven sacred world, someone from Yuan Haigen appeared and wanted to seize the 9 extreme chaos beast in his body. But later, the 9 extreme chaos beast was forcibly stripped by Crepe Myrtle Star Hyakuten, and Yuan Haigen's people never appeared again. And now, Qing Ren actually mentioned Yuan Haigen again, and the spearhead was directed at the heaven-punishing Saint Venerable, Wan Minghai. If Wan Minghai was really from Yuan Haigen, then Yuan Haigen's power was too great. Wan Minghai was an immortal of the immortal Qi continent, an existence that stood at the peak of the immortal Tao. It should be known that even the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion and the human yellow temple could not touch the immortal Qi continent. How do you know? Wan Minghai's eyes trembled, but the aura around him was changing rapidly. His originally ugly face slowly recovered, and a layer of dark aura appeared around his body. It was very strange. Yuan Haigen. Nie Tian looked at Wan Minghai and felt the aura of the latter. He could not help but roar. Wan Minghai's aura was clearly the power of Yuan Haigen. He really was Yuan Haigen's person. Yuan Haigen's people had always been by his side. What was he trying to do? At this moment, Nie Tian felt deeply deceived. Back then, when he saw Wan Minghai getting drunk in the restaurant, he had thought that the latter was a straightforward person, and that it was very simple. Now, it seemed that the simple person was him. What? Are you angry that your mask has been torn? Facing Wan Minghai, who was about to go berserk, Qing Ren was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled faintly, with a very provocative posture. My patience is limited. I'll ask you again, who are you? Wan Minghai roared like thunder. He took a step forward, and the aura around him was so strong that it seemed to tear space inch by inch. Clear and dazzling white cracks could be seen in the space. His aura has become stronger. Nie Tian felt the pressure coming from the void, and his expression suddenly changed. He was shocked. It turned out that Wan Minghai was not poisoned at all. Everything was just an act. At this time, Nie Tian could not help but worry about Myriad Poison's supremacy. Perhaps Myriad Poison's supremacy was not a good person. But at least, he exposed Wan Minghai's true colors. At this time, Wan Minghai's aura had completely changed, and his aura had become extremely strong. It was more than several times stronger than when he fought against the Three Extremes sect master. Nie Tian estimated that Wan Minghai's current strength should be close to the peak of all heaven's experts. Yo, is our saint going to get angry? Facing the furious Wan Minghai, Qing Ren was not the slightest bit afraid. Instead, he smiled provocatively. You're courting death. Wan Minghai could no longer restrain himself. With a roar, the aura around him erupted, and he slapped his palm horizontally. The terrifying power of Nai Yuan Haigen surged out like a torrential wave, causing time and space to tremble. Qing Ren's eyes narrowed slightly, but he was not in a hurry. He put his palms together and then separated them. Countless dark green threads appeared in his palms, forming a poisonous net in front of him, blocking the majestic wave. Qing Ren's figure quickly retreated, and he controlled the poisonous net with both hands. Like a sharp blade, it cut open the wave formed by the Nai Yuan Haigen. In the blink of an eye, the poisonous net was already close to Wan Minghai. Endless poisonous gas rushed at him, causing Wan Minghai's expression to change. He could not hide his shock. Chapter 46-65. The poisonous net closed in. Life or death was decided in an instant. Wan Minghai did not expect Qing Ren to be so strong that he could fight against him head-on. Nie Tian was equally shocked at the scene before him. He originally thought that Qing Ren was an expert in using poison and should be weak in a head-on fight. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated Qing Ren. Bang! At this moment, Wan Minghai slammed his palm forward. Using his palm of flesh and blood, he forcefully smashed the poisonous net in front of him into pieces. Qing Ren's poisonous net was broken, and he couldn't help but frown. Then he laughed. I almost forgot. You are someone who has cultivated the Shura body. How can such a poisonous net hurt you? Original Shura body. When Nie Tian heard Qing Ren's words, he was stunned again. Could it be that, other than the Heaven Punisher Saint Master and Nai Yuan Haigen, Wan Minghai was also from the Shura clan? How many more secrets did this Wan Minghai have? You even know this. It seems that you know me very well. Wan Minghai's eyes were dark and gloomy, emitting a bone-chilling, killing intent. The more Qing Ren knew, the more he could not be allowed to live. If I didn't know, how would I dare to appear before you? Qing Ren chuckled, a hint of craftiness in his eyes. So, you are here for me. Wan Minghai's face darkened. Only now did he realize that Qing Ren's target was him. Humph! Qing Ren sneered. Come on, let me see how strong the real original Shura body is. As you wish. Wan Minghai roared in a low voice. After which, his body trembled and a vast amount of energy gushed out, causing the space around him to tremble. The entire hall shook violently, as though it was about to collapse. What a terrifying power! Nie Tian's expression changed when he sensed the terrifying aura. This was the hall of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. The space was reinforced by extremely powerful arrays. Even so, under the impact of Wan Minghai's aura, it was in danger of collapsing. One could see how powerful Wan Minghai was. It was only at this moment that Nie Tian realized that Wan Minghai had been in disguise all along. Just where did this guy come from? How could he be so terrifying? Very good, so this is the power of the primitive Azura body. Qing Ren was not afraid in the slightest when facing the unparalleled Wan Minghai. Instead, he wore a smile on his face. Courting death. Wan Minghai was enraged. He roared and punched out with his palm. The stone slabs on the ground were lifted up, and the hall shook even more violently. Cracks appeared on the stone pillars nearby. The violent palm overturned the heavens and overturned the earth. Oh no! Nie Tian felt an unparalleled force assaulting his face. His heart sank as he cried out in alarm. Wan Minghai's palm strike was several times stronger than before. That kind of oppressive aura made everyone tremble in fear. If Qing Ren only had the strength he had just now, it would be very difficult for him to receive this palm. In the current situation, Nie Tian hoped that the two of them would be evenly matched, and it would be best if both of them were heavily injured. If Wan Minghai killed Qing Ren, it would be terrible. Good move. Qing Ren was not the slightest bit afraid of the vast palm strike. Instead, he laughed maniacally. Then, a long green sword appeared in his hand, and he stabbed forward in the air. The sword's momentum was unstoppable. Bang! In the next second, a muffled sound rang out. Where the sword landed, it broke through the giant palm strike. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Then, the sword flashed by. Before Wan Minghai even realized it, the sword whizzed past his cheek, creating an ear-piercing sound. Wan Minghai took a step forward and steadied himself. However, there was an extremely glaring sword mark on his cheek, causing him to feel a burning pain. What a strong sword intent! This scene that he expected caused Nie Tian's pupils to shrink. The shock he felt was beyond words. He never thought that Qing Ren would be a swordsman, and that his sword intent was so strong that it was rarely seen in the world. The power of the sword allowed Qing Ren to rank in the top 5 among all the swordsmen that Nie Tian had met. Moreover, Nie Tian could faintly feel that Qing Ren's sword intent was still somewhat restrained, as if he was intentionally hiding something and had not fully displayed it. On the other hand, it must be mentioned that Wan Minghai's original Azura body was really strong. Wan Minghai took a blow from Qing Ren head-on, but he only suffered a flesh wound. The strength of his martial body was evident. Wan Minghai and Qing Ren's strength far exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. You have such a high level of sword principle. Who are you? Wan Minghai suppressed the anger in his heart and growled. He was like a wild beast in a cage, on the verge of losing his mind. He originally thought that Qing Ren was just a second-rate cultivator who could not withstand a single blow. He did not expect that the strength that Qing Ren displayed would shock him again, and even put him at a disadvantage time and time again. Lord Holy Venerate, not only do I know your identity, but I also know why you're close to Nie Tian. Qing Ren chuckled instead and said with a strong sense of ridicule, but let me give you a piece of advice. It's better to dispel this thought as soon as possible. Otherwise, if you infuriate someone, then the price isn't something you can afford. What do you know? Just say it. Wan Minghai clenched his teeth. Anger, hatred, and forbearance, many complicated emotions condensed into 2 cold, sharp blades in his eyes, as if he wanted to eat someone. When Nie Tian heard these 2 people's words, his expression changed drastically. His eyes were dark and excited. Wan Minghai expressed goodwill to him, and even deliberately got close to him. Clearly, he had an ulterior motive. It seemed like Qing Ren already knew everything, which was why he appeared here. Nie Tian was very curious about Qing Ren's identity. How did he know so clearly? Also, who was the certain people that Qing Ren was talking about? Obviously, there was a big shot behind Qing Ren. Moreover, from Qing Ren's words, Nie Tian faintly felt that the former didn't seem to be hostile to him, and was even protecting him. What the hell was going on? Nye Tian felt that the mystery in front of him was getting bigger and bigger, and he couldn't see anything clearly. Lord Holy Venerate, you don't have to provoke me. Qing Ren smiled and said, you know very well what I'm talking about. I can tell you responsibly that if the person you want to resurrect is really resurrected, it won't be of any benefit to you. You really know. Wan Minghai's face suddenly sank and he lost his voice in shock. Qing Ren really knew his purpose. That's right, he got close to Nye Tian to resurrect a very important person. However, this was the most confidential matter of Ni Yuan Haigen. Not to mention outsiders, even within Ni Yuan Haigen, only a few people knew about it. And Qing Ren, a person who had never appeared before, how did he know? Chapter 46-66. Wan Minghai's eyes were bloodshot, staring at Qing Ren like a ferocious wolf. Qing Ren, on the other hand, had a nonchalant look on his face. There was even a mocking smile on his lips as he said, Lord Holy Venerable, since I'm here, your original plan won't work. So, I'll give you a suggestion. Leave while it's still early. Wan Minghai's face was gloomy, not speaking for a long time. Qing Ren laid an ambush here in advance and knew so many things. It was obvious that he was fully prepared. Moreover, from the few exchanges just now, Qing Ren's strength was no weaker than his. If he continued to tangle with Qing Ren, he might not be able to gain the upper hand. However, how could he be willing to leave just like this? Looks like Lord Holy Venerable is still unwilling. Seeing that Wan Minghai was silent for a long time, Qing Ren smiled again and said, but in the current situation, if you and I fight to the death, I'm afraid both sides will suffer. How about this, you and I each make a move. The winner stays and the loser leaves. How about it? The winner stays and the loser leaves. Hearing this, Nye Tian's face darkened. Didn't that mean that no matter what, he would fall into one of these two people's hands? Wan Minghai had the ambition of a wolf and his schemes were huge. Qing Ren was cruel and merciless, and he was not a kind person. No matter whose hands Nye Tian fell into, he would not have a good ending. Good! At this time, Wan Minghai, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke again. His voice was like a wild beast, and his aura erupted. It was as if a tsunami was crashing down. Outside his body, a shadow as dark as the night appeared, as if it tore through the void. It looked extremely strange. The bloodline power of the original Azura physique. Qing Ren looked at Wan Minghai. His originally calm expression changed slightly. Suddenly, he looked at Nye Tian and shouted, Nye Tian, stand behind me. Nye Tian was taken aback at first. He hesitated for a moment, but his figure moved and he stood behind Qing Ren. If he had to choose between these two people, then it would be Qing Ren. At least, up until now, Qing Ren had not done anything detrimental to him. Protect yourself. If you're hurt, that lord will be very angry. Qing Ren smiled strangely at Nye Tian and said, that lord. Nye Tian furrowed his brows in astonishment. Just who was behind Qing Ren? Come. Qing Ren's face turned serious as he growled. A wave of energy began to rise from his body. With him as the center, it expanded in all directions. Barrier. Nye Tian's divine soul moved and immediately sensed that Qing Ren had indeed opened a barrier. Moreover, for some reason, the aura of the spirit formation made Nye Tian feel extremely familiar. It even made him feel an indescribable restlessness. You want to contend against me with a barrier like this? Wan Minghai had also sensed the spirit power in the sky. However, he was laughing wildly. He was extremely arrogant. Nye Tian also frowned and shook his head slightly. Qing Ren's spirit formation was indeed very powerful. However, it was clearly far from enough to contend against Wan Minghai. We'll only know if we can contend against him after we try. Qing Ren was extremely confident in his own spirit formation. He smiled faintly and the corners of his mouth curled up. Primeval Shura, evil prison blood sinks. Wan Minghai's eyes were like a wolf's. Without wasting any more time with Qing Ren, he let out a roar and his aura exploded. Boom, boom, boom. Just as he finished speaking, 3 giant doors of darkness appeared on the ground. Like tombstones, they stood tall in the hall. The stone pillars around them collapsed. The entire hall was on the verge of collapse. It's the 3rd Shura Gate. It seems like I've underestimated you. Qing Ren's eyes trembled, but he did not panic. He tightened his grip on the sword in his hand and said in a low voice, "Luckily, I'm prepared." As he finished speaking, he raised the sword in his hand to the sky. The vast sword essence in his body burst forth. It was so powerful that the heavens and earth trembled. So powerful! Nie Tian could not help but step back in shock. The sword essence that Qing Ren released was no weaker than the sword devil, Yin Fenghua. It even had the aura of the Yang God Sword Emperor. What shocked Nie Tian even more was that he had a strange feeling that Qing Ren's sword essence was somewhat similar to his own sword essence. There seemed to be some similarities. Could it be that he was hallucinating? Primeval Shura, kill. At that moment, Wan Minghai's roar was like thunder. He struck out with his palm and a giant evil Shura form appeared, passing through the 3 Shura gates. Bang, bang, bang. Every time it passed through a Shura gate, the evil Shura form multiplied in size. Its strength and aura increased tenfold. When the evil Shura form passed through the 3rd Shura gate, its aura was like a collapsing mountain, pressing down on them. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He knew that Wan Minghai was extremely powerful, but he did not expect him to be this powerful. The power of this palm was more than enough to destroy mountains. It was enough to destroy heaven and earth. How was Qing Ren going to take this palm? 9 limits of the starry sky, extreme of chaos. Almost at the same time, Qing Ren also spoke. His deep voice was accompanied by heavy breathing. The long sword in his hand swept through the air. Suddenly, all the sword essence in the surroundings was absorbed, and a giant sword shadow whistled out. Bang! The next moment, the 2 forces collided head-on, and there was a muffled sound in the void. Boom boom boom! Bang bang bang! Chi chi chi! Then, violent and chaotic sounds were heard. Waves burst out from the center of the collision, carrying with them the momentum of a stormy sea, sweeping across the field. At this moment, the hall of Wan Yuan Pavilion, which was supported by countless powerful formations, finally could not hold on any longer and collapsed. Boom boom boom! The endless waves destroyed everything in their path. The world collapsed, the dust was like blades, and the flow of time and space was chaotic. Nie Tian stood behind Qing Ren, who helped him block most of the impact. Even so, he could still feel the wind blades piercing his body, and there was a piercing pain all over his body. One could imagine that if it were not for Qing Ren blocking in front of him, he would have been swallowed by the turbulence. After a long time, the violent waves in the void gradually dissipated, and the debris and dust slowly fell. The originally magnificent Wan Yuan Pavilion turned into ashes in the blink of an eye, turning into ruins. With great difficulty, Nie Tian raised his head and saw a cyan-robed figure standing not far away from him. His long robe fluttered in the wind, making him look somewhat frail. However, his body was as sharp and tough as a sharp sword. On the other side, Wan Minghai's eyes were as fierce as ever, glaring at Qing Ren. However, his body was a mess of blood and flesh. His body swayed slightly, as if he could no longer stand. Without a doubt, Qing Ren won this battle. Chapter 46-67. Qing Ren won. Nie Tian was stunned for a long time by the outcome. He had originally thought that Qing Ren's strength was weaker than Wan Minghai's. At the very least, judging from their auras, Qing Ren was much weaker than Wan Minghai. But the result was that Qing Ren won this exchange. To Nie Tian's surprise, He clearly heard and saw Qing Ren using the 9th limit of the Starry Sky 9 limits, the extremity of chaos. The Starry Sky 9 limits was created by the strongest Starry Lord, Hyakuten. Apart from Hyakuten, the previous Starry Sacred Leader, Dongwang Jingrong, and the current Starry Sacred Leader, Nie Tian, no one else would know how to use it. However, Qing Ren had learned the Starry Sky 9 limits, and was able to easily execute the strongest 9th limit. It was too strange. Could it be that the person behind Qing Ren was Hyakuten? Dongwang Jingrong had passed away a long time ago. Therefore, Qing Ren's Starry Sky 9 limits must have come from Hyakuten. Apart from that, there was something else that utterly astonished Nie Tian. The aura that Qing Ren had unleashed was extremely similar to the Star Force, but it was not as pure as the Star Force, and was closer to the origin energy. Nie Tian speculated that Qing Ren must have come into contact with the Star Force frequently, thus he had comprehended the Star Force on his own, thus allowing him to possess such power. Meanwhile, Nie Tian finally realized that the barrier that Qing Ren had activated was the Starry Sky Forbidden Formation. Qing Ren's power might not be as formidable as Wan Minghai's, but the purity of his power was incomparable to Wan Minghai's. This was why Qing Ren was able to defeat Wan Minghai despite being at a disadvantage. So, you're that person's disciple. After a long time, Wan Minghai, whose body could not stop trembling, finally opened his mouth. His eyes were filled with a strange glow, and his lips were even curled up into a smile as he said in a deep voice, "I'm convinced that I lost to you. Go back and tell your master that it's not time yet. Tell him to behave himself." Qing Ren's eyes flickered as he spoke calmly. However, his words were filled with an inviolable dominance. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't know what Qing Ren meant by the timing. "We will meet again, Donghuang's successor." The corners of Wan Minghai's mouth twitched. His powerful voice echoed in the void, but his figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. The successor of Donghuang. When he heard these words, Nie Tian's expression changed. What does that mean? The person behind Qing Ren wasn't Hyakuten, but Dongwang Jingrong? Qing Ren was Dongwang Jingrong's disciple? Pooh! After a long time, when Wan Minghai's aura had completely disappeared, and Nie Tian was still in shock, Qing Ren's body trembled, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Are you okay?" Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He took a step forward, wanting to help Qing Ren up. However, he felt that it was inappropriate, so he could only freeze. "What? You already know my identity, so why are you still wary of me?" Qing Ren coughed dryly. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper, without the slightest trace of blood. "Are you really Lord Donghuang Jingrong's disciple?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled. Although he was still on guard, he still walked over and helped Qing Ren up. "If not, why would I save you?" Qing Ren wiped the blood off the corner of his mouth and smiled bitterly. Then why did you kill all the array masters of the Wan Yuan Pavilion?" Nie Tian's eyes froze, and he asked in a low voice. Qing Ren glanced at Nie Tian and smiled bitterly. "If I said I killed them, would you believe me? You didn't kill them?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Qing Ren smiled again. "Of course not. I sent most of the array masters to leave the heavenly martial sacred domain. A small portion of them who didn't want to leave have entered the 5 Emperor Valley." 5 Emperor Valley. Upon hearing this name, Nie Tian's pupils involuntarily shrank, and a blazing light flickered in them. Qing Ren nodded. He already knew what Nie Tian was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, "Senior Scarlet Fate has already arrived at the 5 Emperor Valley. Don't worry." "You've met Senior Scarlet Fate?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled again, and he was pleasantly surprised. "Of course." Qing Ren smiled and took a deep breath. His complexion became slightly better. "Lord Qing Ren, how did you get here?" Nie Tian gradually believed Qing Ren, but he still wasn't too sure. "Let's go to the 5 Emperor Valley first." Qingren could see that Nye Tian was still a little doubtful, and said with a faint smile, "All right." Nye Tian nodded and helped Qingren forward. The two didn't speak along the way. After passing through the hall, they soon arrived at a remote hut. Qingren didn't say much, and directly pushed the door open and entered the hut. Nye Tian followed closely behind. The hut wasn't big, and it was only about 10 square meters. There was nothing around it. "Open it." Qingren pointed to the ground and said. Nye Tian then saw that there was an iron lock handle on the ground. He gently lifted it, and directly opened a heavy iron door, and a secret passage leading to the deep underground appeared in front of him. "This is the entrance to the Five Emperor Valley?" Nye Tian looked at the deep secret passage, and couldn't help but frown. "Don't worry, if I want to do anything to you, you won't have a chance to resist." Qingren saw that Nye Tian was still doubtful, and said with a faint smile. As he spoke, he directly stepped into the secret passage. Nye Tian's eyes sank slightly, and he also followed in. The secret passage was long and narrow, and the light was very weak, but the two's speed was very fast, and in a short while, they arrived at the other end. The end of the passage suddenly became bright, and Nye Tian knew that they had reached the end. Qingren took the lead to walk out of the passage, and let out a long breath of turbid air. His complexion became much better. The moment Nye Tian walked out of the passage, he suddenly felt a fresh and comfortable breath, and all the pores on his body seemed to open up in an instant. It was very comfortable. This is indeed a secret realm. Nye Tian took a deep breath, looked at the lush world in front of him, and smiled faintly. "Come with me, Senior Scarlet Life is waiting for you." Qingren smiled faintly and led the way. Nye Tian asked Shuedishang, Yu Jingchen, and Mo Rushi to come out of the 9 extremes to see the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart. Along the way, Nye Tian sensed that the void was filled with many mysterious auras, and it was obvious that there were many formations guarding this place. From this, it could be seen that this was indeed the Five Emperor Valley. "We'll be there soon, it's in the valley ahead." Qingren looked at Nye Tian and the others, and smiled faintly. Nye Tian nodded, and a throbbing in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He was about to see the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart, but this was not the key. The most important thing was that the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart had his son, Niefan, by his side. Speaking of which, this was the first time the father and son had met each other. "We're here." Soon, under the lead of Qingren, everyone came to the outside of a valley and smiled faintly. Nye Tian suppressed the excitement in his heart and nodded slightly, but there was a restless blood in his body that was extremely violent and difficult to suppress. Chapter 46-68. The inexplicable restlessness in his blood made Nye Tian feel as if there was a dormant force in his body, like a volcano, waiting to erupt. "Nye Tian, are you all right?" Qingren frowned and asked in a deep voice as he keenly sensed the unusual movement in Nye Tian's body. "I'm fine." Nye Tian suppressed the growing restlessness in his body and forced a smile. At this time, Mo Rushi had directly rushed into the valley. Seeing this, Nye Tian hurriedly followed. In the valley, there was an old man with white hair and beard. He was like an injured lion, sitting on a huge rock. Next to him was a boy who looked to be 6 or 7 years old, who seemed to be in a coma. The old man was the 8th star messenger, the Crimson Life Loyal Heart. And the little boy next to him was the son of Nye Tian and Mo Rushi, Niefan. Mo Rushi rushed into the valley, and quickly came to the side of the Crimson Life Loyal Heart and Niefan. Seeing her son who was still in a coma, she could no longer hold back her tears. Behind Mo Rushi, Nye Tian's body froze. He looked at the pale little boy on the ground and called out in a daze. "This is his son." Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He wanted to take a step forward, but he felt that his legs were very heavy. But he still walked over, step by step. Puff! But at this moment, his body suddenly shook, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood. Nye Tian. The inexplicable scene made Qingren, Shuedishang, and the others' expressions change, and they all cried out in shock. Emo Rushi abruptly turned around and saw that Nye Tian's body was surrounded by a blood-red pillar that enveloped his entire body. The next moment, the still unconscious Nye Fan also changed at the same time. Around Nye Fan's body, a crimson vortex inexplicably appeared. Then, before everyone's eyes, the blood-colored vortex was like a seed that began to crack and grow. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an extremely strange crimson blood tree. The scarlet blood tree was only a few meters tall, but its entire body was bright red, as if it was a blood tree burning with raging flames. It gave off an extremely frightening feeling. This is... Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. They all sucked in a breath of cold air and were speechless. For a split second, they seemed to feel that the scarlet blood tree seemed to contain the changes of all things in the world. It was extremely mysterious. At the same time, the pillar of blood outside Nye Tian's body was also growing taller. It was like a pillar that reached the heavens, and it crazily extended towards the sky, as if it was going to pierce through the clouds. Meanwhile, the scarlet blood tree outside Nye Fan's body was also growing at an almost frantic speed. The color of blood was like fire, blazing and overflowing. The tree branches were like countless tentacles, spreading towards the sky. Everyone looked at Nye Tian, then at Nye Fan. They were so shocked that they couldn't find words to describe their feelings. They had no idea what was going on in front of them. It seemed like there was a bloodline resonance between Nye Tian and Nye Fan, but it was not something ordinary bloodline resonance could compare to. Myriad calamity blood would. At this moment, Qing Ren's eyes were fixed on Nye Fan as he uttered in a deep voice. His voice was not loud, but everyone could hear it clearly. Myriad calamity blood would? What did that mean? While Nye Tian and Nye Fan were having strange reactions, in an extremely hidden place in the all-heavens sacred world. The surroundings were as dark as an abyss, as if it was a boundless world of darkness. This was the core of the all-heavens sacred world, the center of the all-heavens sacred world, the place where the all-heavens sacred world had sealed itself, the heart of the all-heavens sacred world. In the endless darkness, there was a mysterious whirlpool that was like a black hole. After being refined for countless years, it had absorbed an endless amount of darkness. Crack! At a certain moment, the black hole suddenly let out a cracking sound, like a chick breaking out of its shell. The first crack appeared on the smooth surface of the black hole. Crack, crack, crack! Immediately after, there was a burst of cracking sounds. Fine and tiny cracks appeared on the black hole vortex. Waves of tightly locked darkness aura were released from the black hole vortex. In the dark night sky, they turned into many black hands that forcefully pulled everything in the surrounding space into the black hole vortex. Devour. It was a devouring. A fatal devouring that could not be resisted. The black hole vortex devoured everything in time and space, breaking the shackles of the black hole. The moment the black hole vortex opened, the entire all-heavens sacred world could not escape the fatal devouring power. Finally, it's time to end it. In the boundless darkness, a low and suppressed voice faintly rang out, then disappeared in the darkness. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. However, the black hole vortex had already begun its terrifying devouring path. At the same time, in the Valley of the Five Kings in the heavenly martial sacred world. After an unknown period of time, the blood-colored pillar outside Nye Tian's body began to shrink and soon disappeared. Almost at the same time, the crimson tree on Nye Fan's body also disappeared. In the valley, everything returned to normal. High up in the sky, it was clear and bright as if nothing had happened. But everyone's expression was stiff, and they were completely speechless. At this moment, Nye Fan, who had been asleep for a long time, suddenly opened his eyes. Emo Rushi seemed to have awakened from a dream. She gently hugged Nye Fan in her arms, and tears fell from her eyes again. Xiao Fan. Nye Tian also walked over and slowly squatted down, looking at the 6 or 7 years old boy nervously. "Father, father." Nye Fan's lips trembled. His eyes were like black gems as he looked at the silver-haired man in front of him, who was completely unfamiliar yet incomparably familiar, and called out softly. It was an extremely simple word, but it seemed to have exhausted all the little boy's strength. His eyelids closed once again, and he fell into a deep sleep again. Nye Tian was dumbfounded. When the 2 soft words fell in his ears, it was like a thunderclap. At that moment, he felt that his heart had been hit hard, and a raging flame could no longer be extinguished. As people said, mother and son were connected. But they didn't know that the same was true for father and son. After a long time, Nye Tian stood up again. Only then did he feel that his body was filled with a terrible tearing feeling, and all the strength in his body seemed to have been drained. He was exhausted to the extreme. But he still forced himself to hold on and let a smile hang on the corner of his mouth. "Nye Tian, are you okay?" Scarlet Life Loyal Heart struggled to stand up and looked at Nye Tian nervously. "I'm fine." Nye Tian smiled faintly, motioned for Scarlet Life Loyal Heart to sit down and rest, and then looked at Qingren. After a pause, he asked, "Lord Qingren, what do you mean by the myriad calamity Bloodwood?" Chapter 46-69. Myriad Tribulation Bloodwood. When Nye Tian and Nye Fan's mysterious phenomenon appeared, Qingren had uttered 4 words in shock. Myriad Tribulation Bloodwood. Nye Fan had a myriad tribulation body, and the mysterious phenomenon on his body was a scarlet tree. Without a doubt, the myriad tribulation bloodwood that Qingren mentioned was referring to Nye Fan. However, what exactly was the myriad tribulation bloodwood? What did it mean? When Qingren heard Nye Tian mention the myriad tribulation bloodwood, his expression turned ugly, and he did not speak for a long time. "Lord Qingren, if there is anything, please do not hide it." "I can accept it," Nye Tian said seriously. Qingren's reaction made him feel that the matter was not simple. However, Nye Fan's situation had already reached this point. What else could he not accept? Qingren looked deeply at Nye Tian. His expression returned to normal, but his eyes were gloomy as he asked, "Nye Tian, do you know my identity? Aren't you Senior Donghuang's disciple?" Nye Tian asked after being stunned for a while. Could it be that Qingren was not Donghuang's successor? Or did he have another identity? Qingren's mouth twitched slightly. He did not speak but looked at the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart. Qingren is indeed Big Brother Donghuang's disciple, and the only successor. Moreover, his father is a Star Lord. The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart took a deep breath and said, looking at Nye Tian. Nye Tian could not help but narrow his eyes. He did not expect that Qingren had such a relationship with him. Could it be? Immediately, Nye Tian thought of a person, and his eyes lit up. "That's right, Qingren's father is Qing Qi," the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart said without waiting for Nye Tian to finish. Indeed. Just now, Nye Tian had thought of Qing Qi, which was why he had been overjoyed. In addition, Qingren was very familiar with everything in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, so his identity was obvious. "Little Qing, where did you go after Big Brother Donghuang died? Why did you only come back now?" The Scarlet Life Loyal Heart asked Qingren. In the past, Qingren had become the disciple of Donghuang Jingrong, and the latter had once regarded him as the inheritor of the Star Origin Stone. Unfortunately, Donghuang Jingrong discovered that Qingren's physique wasn't suitable for the power of the stars. After that, Donghuang Jingrong fell, and there was no news of Qingren. This time, Qingren's reappearance made the Scarlet Life Dan Heart a little worried and doubtful. Even though he had watched Qingren grow up, who could be sure of human nature? Furthermore, after Qingren returned, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Even his aura was somewhat different from before. Qingren smiled faintly. Of course, he could see what the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was worried about. He took a deep breath and said, "After Master died, I have been looking for the truth. But later, I was seriously injured by a group of mysterious people. After that, he saved me and I have been staying in the primordial starry sky ever since. Primordial starry sky. Scarlet Life Dan Hart immediately frowned and asked, "So you are saying that ultimate martial evil heaven saved you, and you have always been with him?" "Yes." Qingren nodded and said, "It's all thanks to him that my strength has increased so much. I didn't expect Hayakuten to save you." Scarlet Life Loyal Heart frowned and was shocked. To him, Hayakuten and Dongwang Jingrong were enemies. Why would he save the descendant of Dongwang Jingrong? Qing Ren's expression was strange. He hesitated and said, "Actually, he has been looking for the truth behind Master's death. From him, I found out some secret. There was a bigger conspiracy behind Master's death." "A bigger conspiracy?" Nye Tian and the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart were stunned. "Yes." Qing Ren nodded and glanced at the two of them and said, "Master did die in the hands of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, but the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was just used by someone. The real mastermind has been hiding and has yet to show up." "Are you talking about the human Emperor's palace?" Nye Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and asked in a deep voice. According to what he knew, the mastermind behind the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was the human Emperor's palace. No. But surprisingly, Qingren shook his head and his face turned gloomy. He paused and said, "There is an even bigger mastermind behind the human Emperor's palace." "An even bigger mastermind?" Nye Tian and the Crimson Life Loyal Heart couldn't help but gasp at the same time. They looked at each other, speechless. They originally thought that the human Emperor's palace was the supreme existence in the all-heaven sacred world. They didn't expect that there was a mysterious mastermind behind it. An Yuan Haigen? After a while, Nye Tian suddenly thought of Wan Minghai and his eyes trembled. Could it be that the mysterious mastermind was an Yuan Haigen? Or was it related to an Yuan Haigen? Until now, he still didn't know why Wan Minghai was following him. Maybe it has something to do with an Yuan Haigen. Qingren sighed and said with uncertainty, "Little Qing, did he ask you to come out of the primordial starry sky this time?" Scarlet Life Loyal Heart calmed down and suddenly asked Qingren. Nye Tian also immediately looked at Qingren. He obviously knew that the Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was talking about was Hayakuten. "Yes." Qingren nodded and then his expression became a little strange. He looked at Nye Tian and said, "Actually, I came this time for this child." "Fan?" Nye Tian's eyes suddenly sank and his expression changed. He never thought that Qingren actually came for Nye Fan. Qingren nodded again and said, "The reason why Wan Minghai has been following you is also for Nye Fan." This. Nye Tian was stunned and didn't know what to say. If Qingren didn't appear, wouldn't he have personally brought Wan Minghai to the Five Kings Valley? No wonder Wan Minghai followed him to the all-heaven sacred world and wanted to see Nye Fan under the excuse of imparting the Tianji body technique. If it wasn't for Qingren, Nye Tian would probably hand Nye Fan over to Wan Minghai personally. XDW 8-inch Lord Qingren, you said before that Wan Minghai wants to resurrect a person. Does he want to use Fan to resurrect this person? Nye Tian immediately remembered what Qingren said before and couldn't help but ask. "Yes." Qingren nodded and said, "Nye Fan has the myriad calamity body and Wan Minghai wants this." "Damn it." Nye Tian's face was extremely gloomy and he growled, "I didn't expect this person to be so insidious." Fortunately, Qingren came in time, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. "Little Qing, you also came here for Fan. Do you have any means to save him?" Scarlet Life Loyal Heart was still calm and asked Qingren. Qingren glanced at Nye Fan, who was in a coma, and said with an unsightly expression, "I did have a way to save him before I came here, but now that he has awakened the myriad culpa bloodwood, I'm not sure if I can save him." Chapter 4670. What do you mean? Upon hearing Qingren's words, Nye Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. Could it be that Nye Fan couldn't be saved after awakening the myriad calamity blood would? Sir, please save Fan. He's still so young. What did he do wrong? Emo Rushi cried and was about to kneel down in front of Qingren. Qingren quickly stepped forward to hold Emo Rushi and said, "Don't worry, I'm here to save him. No matter what, I'll try my best to save his life." "Thank you, sir." Emo Rushi calmed down and thanked him with a trembling voice. Qingren took a deep breath and looked at Nye Tian. "Nye Tian, you have a very important task ahead of you." "Sir, please speak." Nye Tian nodded with a cold expression. "I need some time to save Nye Fan. During this time, I can't be disturbed." Qingren nodded and said, "But the people from the Triple Extremes sect and the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion will find this place soon. Senior Scarlet Life and the others are severely injured and can't fight back. You'll have to rely on yourself then. If that's the case, won't it be safer for you to enter the Nine Extremes?" Nye Tian narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. If he was afraid of being disturbed, it would be more appropriate to save him in the Nine Extremes. However, Qingren shook his head and said, "The Nine Extremes is a sublayer world with limited spacetime stability. Besides, its spacetime attribute greatly restricts many kinds of powers, so I can't save anyone in the Nine Extremes." Nye Tian nodded and remained silent. The Nine Extremes was a small internal world, which had many restrictions compared to the spacetime of the external world. "Nye Tian, I'll have to rely on you now." Qingren looked at Nye Tian and nodded solemnly. "Sir, don't worry. As long as I'm here, I won't allow anyone to come near you," Nye Tian said with a heavy tone, his eyes as sharp as blades. "Brat, with Nye Tian's current strength, how can he fight against the experts from the Triple Extremes sect and the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion?" Scarlet Life Loyal Heart on the side changed his expression and asked in a deep voice. Not to mention the Heavenly Dao Sacred Pavilion, just the Sanji sect alone had many experts who were close to the pinnacle. No matter how heaven-defying Nye Tian was, his cultivation level was still too low. How could he possibly defy the heavens? "Senior Scarlet Fate, don't worry. I've already made arrangements." Qingren smiled faintly, then waved his hand and shouted, "Open the array!" Following his words, runes began to appear in the surrounding space. In the blink of an eye, an enormous formation was formed. "This is..." Scarlet Life Dan Xian was stunned by the scene in front of him and couldn't speak for a while. He had never thought that Qingren would be able to activate such a huge saint formation in the blink of an eye. The aura of this formation is so familiar. Nye Tian was also quite shocked. He could not help but frown and murmur. He had never seen this formation before, but the aura within the formation gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. This is the Nine Limits formation, which is based on the Nine Limits of the starry sky. Qingren smiled faintly and pointed a few times in the air. 9 bright light spots appeared in the formation and floated in midair like stars. As I thought. Nye Tian carefully sensed the aura of the Nine Limits formation and nodded his head. Qingren smiled and said, "These 9 stars are the 9 limits of the Nine Limits formation. In the Nine Limits formation, the power of the starry sky 9 limits will increase by a few times, and the formation will also greatly improve your strength. At the same time, it will also suppress the strength of everyone who enters the formation. Your mission is to protect the formation from collapsing and buy me enough time." Nye Tian nodded his head heavily with a near-fatal determination in his eyes. Next, Scarlet Life Dan Xian, Mo Rushi, and the rest entered the Nine Limits formation, while Qingren and Nye Fan stayed in the formation core of the Nine Limits formation. As long as Nye Tian guarded the formation and the formation core was not broken, Qingren and Nye Fan would be safe. Nye Tian went back and forth in the Nine Limits formation to familiarize himself with the overall structure of the formation and understand the power of the formation so that it would be easier to use. Nye Fan lay quietly in the formation core. Although his breathing was weak, it was still stable. Qing Ren was not in a hurry to rescue him. Instead, he carefully sensed Nie Fan's aura and the various powers in his body. The myriad tribulation body was already extremely troublesome, and now that Nie Fan had awakened the myriad tribulation blood it would be even more difficult. Qing Ren had cultivated the Tao of alchemy, formation, and sword Tao since he was young. He was a rare all-rounder. Moreover, his title of Myriad Poison Venerable was not just for show. In the entire all-heaven sacred world, Qing Ren's Tao of alchemy was not ranked at all, but his Tao of poison was superb. He was at least ranked in the top 5. At this moment, Qing Ren thought of a method to temporarily paralyze the tribulation power of the myriad tribulation body with poison. Originally, he had already planned a set of suppression methods, but he did not expect Nie Fan to awaken the myriad tribulation blood completely messing up his original plan. Seeing that Qing Ren was fully focused, Nie Tian did not dare to disturb him and focused on studying the 9 limits formation. In the blink of an eye, half a day passed. In the formation core of the 9 limits formation, Qing Ren let out a long breath. Several silver needles appeared in his hand. He was ready to make a move. However, at this moment, a rumble came from the void in the distance. They actually found me so quickly. Qing Ren looked at the sky with a trace of unconcealable panic on his face. He did not expect the people from the 3 extremes sect to come so quickly. Mister, don't worry about treating him. Leave the rest to me. Nie Tian also looked at the sky. He had already sensed several powerful auras, but he did not show any fear. Qing Ren nodded slightly. He did not pay attention to anything else and focused all his attention on Nie Fan. Nie Tian's gaze was sharp as he waited for them to come. A moment later, several figures landed. One of them was none other than the sect leader of the 3 extremes sect, Shangguan Hong. Beside Shangguan Hong stood a gray-robed old man and a tall lady, who was rather old but still had some charm. Nie Tian, you're here. Shangguan Hong locked his gaze on Nie Tian with a strong murderous intent. He took a step forward and landed on the 9 limits formation. The old man in gray and the tall woman moved too. They landed almost at the same time, causing the 9 limits formation to tremble slightly. Just the 3 of you? Nie Tian showed no fear. He sneered and spoke in a provocative manner. Shangguan Hong sneered and said, "You're still so calm even when you're about to die. It seems like I've underestimated you." Die? Nie Tian also sneered. He glanced at the 3 of them and said in a loud voice, "Do you think you 3 little shrimps can kill me? You're courting death." The old man in gray's eyes darkened. Cold murderous intent surged out of him. He growled and his body was like a sharp blade as he broke through the 9 limits formation and entered it. Chapter 46-71. The gray-robed old man's figure was as sharp as a blade. He cut open the 9 limits formation and entered the formation. Nie Tian stared at the gray-robed old man in front of him. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes and feel a chill run down his spine. The gray-robed old man was extremely skinny and gave off a cold and sharp aura. His face looked like it was made of skin and no flesh. His eyes were as cold as an eagle's, making him look like a walking corpse. Up in the sky, Shangguan Hong and the tall woman did not follow him in. Instead, they looked on with interest, as if they were enjoying a good show. "Big brother, this kid is not simple. He could easily enter the forbidden area of the 10,000 yuan pavilion and even activate such a formation. He must have a close relationship with Qing Qi of the 10,000 yuan pavilion." The tall, slender woman had a cold, charming look in her eyes as she looked at Nie Tian, as if she wanted to steal his soul. The 3 extremes sect has nothing to do with the 10,000 yuan pavilion. However, this kid is wanted by the sacred pavilion. If old Qing wants to settle the score, the sacred pavilion will take care of it. Shangguan Hong said with a smile. The tall lady raised her eyebrows and said with a charming smile, This kid is really unlucky. He could have offended anyone, but he chose to offend the sacred pavilion. If it wasn't for the sacred pavilion wanting his life, I would have taken him in. Second sister, don't think that his cultivation level is low. His strength far exceeds that of an ordinary person. Even Ouyang Changa died in his hands. Shangguan Hong glanced at the tall lady and said with a smile, "Really?" The tall lady raised her eyebrows and was shocked. "Yes." Shangguan Hong nodded his head and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Ouyang Changa was the deputy sect leader of the Three Extremes sect. He was extremely important to the entire Three Extremes sect. However, he died in the hands of Nie Tian. How could Shangguan Hong not be heartbroken? If that's the case, then it's really interesting. The frown on the slender woman's face gradually disappeared. A hint of playfulness could be seen in her eyes as she mumbled, "I wonder if third brother will be able to take him down. Ouyang Changa cannot be compared to our third brother. If we can't even take down this brat, we can forget about our title as the Sky Marshal Three Evils." Shangguan Hong's eyes darkened as he said coldly. It turned out that Shangguan Hong, the tall woman, and the gray-clothed old man were sworn brothers. The three of them were known as the Tianwu Three Evils. In the early years, the Three Evils of Tianwu were extremely famous, and they shocked the entire Tianwu sacred realm. Later on, the three of them split up and established the Three Extremes sect, Six Flowers Palace, and Nine Corpses Society respectively. Shangguan Hong was the sect master of the Three Extremes sect, the tall lady, Lian Wuni, was the palace master of the Six Flowers Palace, and the gray-clothed old man, Chun Tsang, was the leader of the Nine Corpse Gang. The three great forces were all first-rate forces of the Heaven Martial Association. However, the Three Extremes sect was more famous, while the Six Flowers Palace and the Nine Corpses Society were more mysterious. This time, Shangguan Hong called Lian Wuni and Chun Tsang along to ensure that nothing went wrong. At this moment, Shangguan Hong was not worried about Chun Tsang, who was in the Nine Limits formation, but he was wary of Wan Minghai. Not long ago, he had been defeated by Wan Minghai, and he had even suffered serious injuries. If Lian Wuni had not treated him, he would not have been able to recover until now. At this moment, Wan Minghai had not shown up, which was what he was really worried about. "Brother, why isn't the person you mentioned around?" Lian Wuni's eyes were like a fox's. As she spoke, she extended her divine sense to the surroundings, but she did not sense any unusual aura. "That person is proficient in the space-time technique. Are you sure he's not around?" Shangguan Hong asked with a calm gaze, as he knew Lian Wuni's capabilities well. Lian Wuni nodded and said with a smile, "Don't worry, brother. My Six Calamities mystical flower technique won't be able to escape my eyes, even if it's a sublayer space." Shangguan Hong nodded and relaxed his tense nerves. He let out a long breath and said, "The sacred protector will be here soon. As long as he's here, even if that person appears, he won't be a threat." Lian Wuni glanced sideways at Shangguan Hong without saying a word. In her opinion, Shangguan Hong was being overly cautious because of his previous defeat. Even if the Heavenly Tao Sacred Protector was not here, the two of them could easily deal with Wan Minghai. However, it was a pity that they did not know Wan Minghai's true identity. Wan Minghai had only been fooling around in the previous battle. He was merely putting on a show for Nie Tian. If Wan Minghai really came, even the Sky Marshal Three Evils might not stand a chance against him, let alone Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni. As the two of them were conversing, a life-and-death battle was about to begin in the Nine Limits formation. "Kid, you're Nie Tian, right?" Chun Tsang's gaze was extremely cold. It was as if the spacetime around him was shrouded by an extremely cold aura, causing one to feel a suffocating pressure. "Make your move." Nie Tian did not waste any time and immediately spoke. The star energy in his body continued to accumulate, and the sky sword in his hand vibrated slightly, emitting a terrifying cry. Are you in such a hurry to die? Chen Tsang was not in a hurry to make his move. He glanced at Qing Rin and Ye Fan in the formation core and chuckled. If I'm not mistaken, you're protecting these two, right? You talk too much. Nye Tian wore a cold expression as he stomped the ground with the tip of his foot, activating the sword seal. A surge of sword intent spread out like a tidal wave. Seeing this, Chen Tsang let out a cry of surprise. However, he was not afraid in the slightest. Instead, he smiled and said, the former chief of the Hidden Dragon clan was actually able to grow to such an extent in such a short period of time. As he spoke, a fierce aura was unleashed in front of him. In an instant, it had the power to topple mountains and overturn seas, suppressing Nye Tian's sword intent to the point where it couldn't advance even an inch. Kid, don't tell me that you really think you can fight me with your cultivation of the second layer of Heaven Awakening Realm, and this little formation? Chen Tsang's lips twitched as he sneered. As soon as he finished laughing, his figure moved and disappeared like a ray of light. Disappeared. He really disappeared. Nye Tian was stunned by the scene before him. He then focused his attention and activated his demonic eye to observe his surroundings. Chen Tsang's movement skill was extremely strange. Although he was in the 9 limits formation, he did not seem to be suppressed at all. It's been years since we last met. Third Brother's divine corpse technique has improved, Shangguan Hong said calmly as he looked down from the sky. Third Brother's divine corpse technique has improved a lot, but he still needs my help if he wants to unleash more power. Lian Wuni smiled and said proudly, You're right, sister. Shangguan Hong's eyes flickered as he nodded slightly. Not only Chen Tsang, but even Shangguan Hong's 9 candle dragon body needed the help of Lian Wuni's 6 calamities flower in order to unleash its full power. The next moment, Shangguan Hong's eyes darkened as he exclaimed, Third Brother, are you going to activate the 8 martial corpse refinement formation? Lian Wuni's eyes flickered as she giggled. It looks like Third Brother has taken a fancy to this kid's potential and is going to refine him into a corpse slave. Chapter 46-72. 8 Martial Corpse Refinement Array. Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni were surprised to see Chen Tsang activating the array. They didn't expect Chen Tsang to have such an evil intention and want to refine Nye Tian into a corpse slave. However, Shangguan Hong was more surprised, while Lian Wuni was more playful, as though she was watching a good show. Although they had a close relationship with Chen Tsang, they had never seen him refine a corpse slave. Nye Tian was a good material to refine a corpse slave so they could witness a good show. Isn't Third Brother messing around? He knows that Nye Tian is wanted by the Sacred Pavilion. If he is refined into a corpse slave, how is he going to explain it to the Sacred Pavilion? Shangguan Hong frowned and said in a deep voice. Lian Wuni giggled and said, Big brother, why are you so nervous? Isn't the Sacred Pavilion trying to kill this kid? If he becomes a corpse slave, what difference is there between him and being dead? Even if we take a step back and the Sacred Pavilion isn't willing, we can just hand this kid over to the Sacred Pavilion. Okay. Shangguan Hong responded in a low muffled voice and didn't say anything else. At this moment, he didn't know why, but he had an ominous premonition. Within the 9 limits array, Chen Tsang activated the array, intending to refine Nye Tian into a corpse slave. An array within an array? Nye Tian frowned when he sensed the subtle changes in the void, and he secretly tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. 8 Martial Corpse Refinement Array, Rise. At this moment, Chen Tsang's cold voice suddenly rang out in the void. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, 8 waves of corpse chi rose from the 8 directions around Nye Tian, their violent auras shaking the surroundings. Nye Tian instantly felt the bloody corpse aura rushing towards him. He waved the sword in his hand in the air, and the sword aura forcefully dispersed the waves of corpse aura. Good lad, you're quite capable. I didn't expect there to be such power in my 8 martial corpse refinement array. Chen Tsang let out a strange cry. His figure flashed and disappeared into a wave of corpses. Nie Tian's demonic eyes suddenly focused and the celestial demon in verse mark appeared. The sword aura around him suddenly surged and surged like raging wave. Seeing this scene, Chen Tsang could not help but exclaim in surprise again. Kill him! Nie Tian's eyes darkened. Following the direction of the voice, he swung the sky sword and cleaved a corpse pillar in half. Unfortunately, Chen Tsang wasn't hiding in one of the corpse pillars. Well done, Nie Tian. I've really underestimated you. Chen Tsang's voice rang out again, and the corpse pillar that had been split apart also reformed in the blink of an eye, returning to its original state. Acting all mysterious. Nie Tian's eyes were gloomy. With a low roar, he swung his sword several times. Every time his sword fell, another corpse pillar would be split open. However, the corpse pillars were formed by the waves of corpse qi, and they reformed in the blink of an eye. Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni were shocked as they looked at the array from above. Although Shangguan Hong already knew that Nie Tian had killed Ouyang Chang'e, he had not seen Nie Tian's power with his own eyes. Now that he had witnessed Nie Tian's domineering sword essence, he was naturally shocked. Lian Wuni was even more shocked. She could not help but murmur, "Big brother, this kid is indeed powerful. If the sacred pavilion didn't insist on killing him, I would have taken him in." The two of them were Chen Tsang's sworn brothers, so they naturally knew how powerful the 8 martial corpse refinement array was. Especially the 8 corpse pillars. Just the pressure of the corpse qi alone was enough to kill an ordinary sky martial divine ancestor. However, Nie Tian was only at stage 2 of the heavenly enlightenment realm, yet he was able to destroy the corpse pillars with ease. This showed how powerful he was. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian swung his sword several times, but he was unable to destroy the corpse pillars completely. Third brother, stop playing around. Let's end this quickly. When Shangguan Hong saw that Chen Tsang still hadn't made a move, he couldn't help but worry that a long delay would bring trouble. It's time to end this. Chen Tsang's voice rang out from within the 9 limits grand spell formation. Immediately after, the 4 corpse pillars shook violently, and an endless amount of corpse qi surged out of them, forming a gigantic hand in the air that pressed down towards Nie Tian. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He then stabbed his sword out and destroyed the giant hand. At the same time, his sword qi swept across the void and shattered the 4 corpse pillars. How is this possible? Chen Tsang's strange voice could be heard from the void. Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni's expressions changed. They were so shocked that they could not speak. The power of Nie Tian's sword was so powerful. Is this all you've got? Nie Tianling stood in the void like a mountain. He shouted in disdain, "You can't even withstand a single blow. You're courting death." Chen Tsang was completely infuriated. He growled and the 8 corpse pillars moved at the same time. The violent corpse qi, wave after wave, pressed down on Nie Tian. Unfortunately, Nie Tian just stood where he was and the sword qi around him surged. The corpse qi could not get close to him at all. Damn it! Chen Tsang was furious. His roar echoed through the void. He did not expect Nie Tian's sword qi to be so strong that it did not fear his corpse qi at all. You want to kill me with this kind of strength? What a joke! With a cold laugh, Nie Tian strode forward step by step. His surging sword qi seemed invincible as it forcibly dispersed the raging waves of corpse qi. How dare you look down on me? Chen Tsang was completely mad. He was a famous martial artist in the world, but he was mocked by a junior. How could he take it lying down? Just as his voice fell, the 8 corpse pillars corpse qi soared into the sky, and then quickly gathered together, quickly fusing into a huge corpse pillar. At this moment, Chen Tsang's figure appeared. He stood on the corpse pillar, and his gray robe fluttered in the wind. He looked like a master. Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni's faces changed at the sight of this. 8 corpse pillars combined into one, the descent of the corpse deity. Chen Tsang was going to use the last move of the corpse deity sutra. I'll go down and help him. Lian Wuni frowned, but before she could move, she was stopped by Shangguan Hong. Third brother is now in the corpse deity state. If you want to get close to him, you'll have to pay a considerable price. Since third brother has made this move, let's just watch the battle quietly. Shangguan Hong's eyes were gloomy. In the 9 limits array, the huge corpse pillar under Chen Tsang's feet was surging with corpse chi. It was so imposing that it seemed like it was going to devour everything. However, Nie Tian's face was still as calm as water, and there was not a single ripple in his eyes. Kid, you're dead. The corpse chi around Chen Tsang was extremely dense, and his entire body was like a huge mummy. He stared at Nie Tian with murderous intent. Is that so? Nie Tian sneered and said, so this is your biggest reliance. It seems like I've overestimated you. I just wanted to play with you, but I didn't expect you to be so weak. In my eyes, your corpse god state is nothing but a clay chicken and a pottery dog. The sword in my hand can shake the heavens. I only need one sword to kill you. The cold words fell in Chen Tsang's ears, but it was like a steel blade piercing his heart, making him extremely furious. Die. In the next instant, Chen Tsang roared and moved instantly. He was like an extremely fast blade that directly attacked Nie Tian. Swoosh. At the same time, Nie Tian waved the sword in his hand, and the brilliance of the sword cut through the dark void. The sword radiance whistled and tore the void apart. A ray of blood flashed in the sky, and along with it, a shriveled head appeared. It was Chen Tsang. Chapter 46-73. A murderous gust of wind blew past. The human head fell to the ground along with the corpse chi and blood chi. Chen Tsang's head was decapitated with just one slash. Just as Nie Tian had said, the so-called state of the zombie deity was as useless as a chicken in front of his sword. As the human head slowly fell to the ground, it was still wondering why it had ended up like this. Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni were dumbfounded in the sky, but their eyes were filled with unconcealable shock and fear. They were completely unable to clearly see how the scene just now had happened. The state of the zombie deity, that was Chen Tsang in the state of the zombie deity. How had he been killed by Nie Tian with a single slash? Besides, wasn't Nie Tian being suppressed the entire time? Could it be that everything was as Nie Tian had said, that he was just playing with Chen Tsang? But Nie Tian was only in the second layer heavenly enlightenment realm. How could he have such a powerful strength? Could it be the problem with the formation? Lian Wuni was shocked for a long time. She suddenly thought of something and exclaimed in astonishment. Formation. Shangguan Hong was startled, but he soon reacted. He stared at the 9 limits formation in astonishment and carefully sensed the aura of the formation runes. His face gradually stiffened. He had been worried about Wan Minghai previously, but he had completely forgotten about the formation. He had assumed that the grand spell formation would only be able to help Nie Tian improve his cultivation base by a little bit, and that it couldn't possibly be that powerful. Besides, Chen Tsang had easily torn open the formation and entered it. However, when he sensed the aura of the formation runes, he realized that the runes were completely different from ordinary formations. The aura was extremely pure and terrifying. That's right. Chen Tsang's defeat was mainly due to the 9 limits formation. Furthermore, his greatest failure was opening a formation within the 9 limits grand formation. The 9 limits great formation was based on the starry sky 9 limits great formation. It was created by the extreme martial evil heaven, who was known as the extreme martial extreme. The formation runes within it were pure energy formed by fusing the power of the stars and the power of the opposing stars. From the beginning to the end, after Chen Tsang opened the array, his strength was completely suppressed by the 9 limits grand array. The reason why Nye Tian did not kill him right away was because he wanted to see how strong he was, and also because he wanted to better understand the power of the Nine Limits formation. Due to the short amount of time he had, his understanding of the Nine Limits formation was not too deep. He was still stuck on the surface. In battle, one's perception and comprehension of formation runes were much more direct. What was even more coincidental was that Chen Tsang had also activated a formation within a formation. Even though the 8 Martial Corps refinement formation was very, very weak compared to the Nine Limits Grand formation, it was still an attack from the Nine Limits Grand formation. It was practically a natural aid to Nye Tian's comprehension of the Nine Limits Grand formation. That was why Nye Tian had allowed Chen Tsang to live until now. At this moment, Nye Tian finally understood how powerful the Nine Limits formation was. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that without the Nine Limits formation, he wouldn't even be able to win this battle, let alone crush Chen Tsang with a single sword strike. Shangguan Hong, it's your turn. Nye Tian lifted his head to look at the sky with a cold glint flickering in his eyes. Shangguan Hong abruptly woke up from his stupor, and his face went pale with shock. He actually revealed an extremely terrified expression. Brother, are you all right? On the other hand, Lian Wuni remained calm. She glanced at Shangguan Hong before fixing her gaze on Nye Tian. I'm fine. Shangguan Hong immediately realized that he had lost his composure and quickly recovered, but he did not dare to look at Nye Tian. Brother, let's enter the formation. Lian Wuni was full of battle intent. She spoke coldly and was about to enter the formation. However, she was stopped by Shangguan Hong, who said, "Second sister, this kid is a little strange. His formation is too strange. Let's wait." Wait? Lian Wuni was stunned. She looked at Shangguan Hong with a strange gaze and asked coldly, "Aren't we going to avenge our third brother?" She couldn't believe that the Shangguan Hong in front of her was her sworn brother. Back when the 3 evils of Tianwu were conquering the world, Shangguan Hong had always been at the front, the fiercest and the most vicious. Now, he was behaving so submissively in front of a second-stage heaven perception realm cultivator. She could not understand why. Yes, Nye Tian was strong and his formation was strange, but they were close to the peak of the sky martial arts realm. Moreover, her 6 calamities flower could greatly enhance Shangguan Hong's 9 candle dragon physique. With the two of them working together, how could they possibly be afraid of Nye Tian? We have to avenge our third brother, but we don't have to rush. Shangguan Hong's eyes darkened. The sacred protector will be here soon. Why should we take the risk? Lian Wuni frowned and stared at Shangguan Hong for a long time. There was no longer any charm in her eyes, only coldness and unfamiliarity. It seemed that after such a long time, Shangguan Hong was no longer the brother she used to know. Sister, trust me. When the sacred protector arrives, I will kill Nye Tian with my own hands to avenge our third brother. Shangguan Hong could tell that Lian Wuni was unhappy, so he said seriously, "Okay." Lian Wuni replied coldly and didn't say anything else. If Shangguan Hong wasn't willing to enter the formation, she would be courting death if she entered alone. What's wrong? You're the leader of the Sanji sect, but you don't even have the guts to enter the formation? Nye Tianling laughed provocatively. Brat, don't be too arrogant. You won't live for long. Lian Wuni's beautiful eyes were gloomy as she shouted coldly. Shangguan Hong's face was gloomy, and he didn't say a word. He wanted to enter the formation and fight, but his rationality told him that he had to wait for the arrival of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Protector. He had a strong feeling that Nye Tian hadn't shown his true strength yet. If he and Lian Wuni entered the formation now, they wouldn't end up any better than Chen Tsang. Seeing that the two of them had no intention of entering the formation, Nye Tian didn't provoke them anymore and waited quietly. Anyway, his mission was to guard the formation. As long as the formation didn't force him, everything would be easy once Qing Ren was done with Nye Fan. Who's there? At this moment, Lien Wuni suddenly sensed something. She shouted and raised her hand in the air. A blood-red flower petal shot out like a sharp blade at an extremely fast speed. However, the petal paused in the air in the next moment and fell to the ground weakly. Then, where the petals fell, a figure faintly appeared. "It's you!" Shangguan Hong was taken aback at first, but when he saw the person's appearance, his expression changed, and he cried out in alarm. "Sect Master, we meet again." The newcomer spoke calmly with a playful smile on his lips. "Brother, who is he?" Lien Wuni could sense that the person's strength was not to be underestimated. She couldn't help but ask. "He's the person who injured me not long ago." Shangguan Hong's eyes trembled slightly as he said hatefully. "Wan Minghai." On the other hand, Nie Tian called out the person's name in a low voice from the grand formation down below. "You actually didn't leave." Chapter 46-74. Wan Minghai. Nie Tian's eyes were filled with murderous intent when he saw who it was. He didn't expect Wan Minghai to come back. Qing Ren's expression changed slightly when he saw Wan Minghai, but he quickly regained his composure and focused on treating Nie Fan. Wan Minghai's sudden appearance caused the atmosphere to become tense and strange. Shangguan Hong's expression kept changing as he looked at Wan Minghai. He could sense that Wan Minghai's aura had changed drastically as compared to a few days ago. If Wan Minghai hadn't taken the initiative to reveal his identity, he would have thought that Wan Minghai was a different person. "Big brother, this person's aura is unfathomable." Lien Wuni's expression changed as she glanced at Wan Minghai. She possessed the 6 calamities flower art and was extremely sensitive to the aura of a cultivator. However, when she sensed Wan Minghai's aura, she felt as if her soul had fallen into an endless hell, causing her to feel hopeless and helpless. Lien Wuni knew that she was not an ordinary person, and she had even seen a few top-notch martial Dao powerhouses. However, she had never felt something like this before, which was unacceptable to her. Judging from his aura, Wan Minghai was definitely not weaker than a top-notch martial Dao powerhouse, and he might even be stronger than the 5 deans. With such strength, Wan Minghai could definitely crush Shangguan Hong easily. However, Shangguan Hong had clearly said that he had only lost to Wan Minghai, and had even injured the latter. In Lien Wuni's opinion, this was simply impossible. Shangguan Hong nodded. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead due to his extreme nervousness. He had already sensed the change in Wan Minghai, which made him shudder inexplicably. "Sect leader, why are you so nervous?" Wan Minghai looked at the two of them and smiled. "Am I that scary? What's the relationship between you and Nie Tian?" Shangguan Hong forced himself to remain calm and asked. Wan Minghai smiled and said, "Before, Nie Tian and I were in a cooperative relationship. Now, he's my enemy." "Enemy?" Shangguan Hong was stunned when he heard that, and he thought that he had heard wrongly. A few days ago, Wan Minghai had risked his life to protect Nie Tian, as if the latter was his master. How did they become enemies in just a few days? "Lord Saint, why are you teasing them? Just kill them." At this time, Nie Tian's voice suddenly rang out, and he shouted loudly. Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni's expressions changed drastically, and they retreated in fear to keep a distance from Wan Minghai. Wan Minghai frowned and glanced at Nie Tian cold. "Nie Tian, don't you think that a mere formation can stop me? Since you're not afraid of the array, why don't you come and sit in the array?" Nie Tian laughed wildly, looking very arrogant. Wan Minghai had been hiding for a long time. Only now did he dare to reveal himself. Clearly, he was observing from the shadows. However, even though he had appeared, he did not directly barge into the 9 limits formation. It was likely that he was wary of it. Nie Tian was aware of this, which was why he dared to make such a fuss. Wan Minghai snorted and looked at Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni. "I'll join forces with the two of you to break the formation. Nie Tian will be yours, and the 2 people in the eye of the formation will be mine." His words were cold and domineering, leaving no room for negotiation. This! Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni gasped at the same time, and they were momentarily speechless. Until now, they still did not understand the relationship between Nie Tian and Wan Minghai. What if the two of them joined forces to trick them into the formation? If they were outside the formation, they would still have a chance of survival even if they were no match for Wan Minghai. However, once they entered the formation, they would definitely die. Two fools! If I wanted to kill the two of you, you would already be two corpses. Wan Minghai burst into explosive rage as he roared fiercely, and the imposing aura in his entire body surged out, causing peerlessly violent pressure to surge through the sky and shake the heavens and the earth to rumble. Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni were caught off guard by the overwhelming aura, and they were forced to retreat while vomiting blood. You! The two of them tried their best to stabilize themselves, and after exchanging glances, they looked at Wan Minghai in shock. They knew that Wan Minghai was powerful, but they did not expect him to be so powerful that they could not withstand his aura alone. There is a limit to my patience. Tell me your answer. Wan Minghai was cold, and his body was filled with killing intent. Let's join forces. Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni were tongue-tied, and they nodded continuously. Very well. Enter the formation. Wan Minghai shouted in a low voice, and he slapped his palm in the void, causing a powerful force to descend, and Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni could not breathe. The two of them did not dare to think any further, and they dashed straight towards the Nine Limits formation. Shangguan Hong and Lien Wuni entered the formation immediately, and they could feel the strange aura in the void. They could not help but look at each other, and they could not hide their panic. They looked at Wan Minghai, who was high up in the sky, but he did not move at all, and he was staring at them coldly. Holy Senior, hurry up and enter the formation! Shangguan Hong could not help but panic even more, and he shouted loudly. He said that you are fools, and he is not lying at all. Nie Tian sneered and said, Don't tell me you still can't tell? He is asking you to test the formation. Test the formation? Shangguan Hong's eyes narrowed, and he immediately realized what was going on, and his face instantly turned pale. Wan Minghai did not want to join forces with them, and he only wanted them to enter the formation to fight with Nie Tian, so that they could continue to observe the formation. Brother, since we are already in the formation, it is useless to be afraid. Let's fight with this fellow. Lien Wuni was very calm, and her eyes were filled with coldness as she stared at Nie Tian. She originally wanted to enter the formation to fight with Nie Tian, and she wanted to take revenge for her third brother, Chen Song. Even though she was forced to enter the formation, she was still not afraid of Nie Tian. She did not believe that with the combined strength of her and Shangguan Hong, they would be afraid of a mere stage 2 heaven enlightenment martial artist. Second sister, Nie Tian's strength is strange, and we are also in the formation. We must not be impulsive. Shangguan Hong was panicking, but he was extremely cautious, so he took a deep breath and said. He did not have confidence in Nie Tian's strength, and the scene of him killing Chen Song was too shocking, so he could not help but be afraid. At this moment, he still placed his hopes on the Heavenly Law Divine Protector. Everything would be easy once the Heavenly Law Divine Protector arrived. Isn't it just a hidden dragon chief? What is there to be afraid of? However, Lien Wuni was not afraid of Nie Tian. She laughed coldly and moved at an extremely fast speed, like the wind and lightning, and turned into a crimson flower in the air. Nie Tian's gaze froze, and he saw a crimson trail in the void in front of him. Lien Wuni. The sudden change made Shangguan Hong's expression change drastically, and he immediately rushed over after screaming. His 9 candle dragon body needed the help of Lien Wuni's 6 calamities flower in order to unleash its full strength. If Lien Wuni was killed by Nie Tian, how could he survive alone? Chapter 46-75. In the 9 Limits formation, Lien Wuni moved as fast as lightning. She seemed to have turned into a gorgeous flower that was as beautiful as blood. Her beauty was dazzling, but there was an extremely cold, killing intent. You think you can do it? You're overestimating yourself. Nie Tian wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he sneered, and the celestial demon in verse mark appeared at the corner of his eyes. The sword intent around him instantly surged, and it seemed like it was going to devour the sky. Boom! In the next instant, Nie Tian struck with his sword. The majestic sword aura suppressed everything and shook the surroundings. Watch out! Shangguan Hong's eyes narrowed when he saw that, and he screamed in shock. How could he not know that Nie Tian had made up his mind to kill Lian Wuni with a single strike? However, it was a pity that it was too late. The shadow of the sword fell like a mountain, and wherever it passed, everything was destroyed. The blood-red flower didn't even have time to bloom before it was destroyed in an instant. Second sister. The scene before him caused Shangguan Hong's body to freeze for a moment. He stood rooted to the spot and shouted in a daze. Nie Tian was so powerful that he killed Lian Wuni with a single strike. Although Lian Wuni wasn't a head-on combat martial artist, her cultivation wasn't much weaker than an expert at the peak of the heaven martial arts realm. Nie Tian was able to kill her with a single strike. His strength was too terrifying. However, at this moment, Nie Tian frowned, and his lips curled into a smile. I didn't expect you to have such a trick up your sleeve. I've underestimated you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around slightly, and his gaze locked onto a charming figure. It was Lian Wuni. This. Shangguan Hong immediately reacted, and he looked at Lian Wuni in shock. He didn't know what was going on. Young man, you're indeed very powerful, but I'm not to be trifled with. Lian Wuni's beautiful eyes were cold. She stared at Nie Tian coldly, and her lips curled into a cold smile. 6 calamities flower, 9 links to heaven and earth. Your formation might be useful to others, but it's useless against me. Really? Nie Tian smiled, placed his hands behind his back and said calmly, It's already not bad that you can dodge my sword. But with my next strike, I will take your life. Brat, you're still young, but your tone isn't small. Lian Wuni sneered and moved to Shangguan Hong's side. Although her words were very strong, in reality, she was already somewhat afraid of Nie Tian and did not dare to be careless in the slightest. Just now, she just wanted to test how strong Nie Tian was in this kind of grand array. She didn't expect Nie Tian to destroy her 6 tribulations incarnation with just one sword strike. It should be noted that this incarnation of the 6th tribulation had taken her nearly 100,000 years to cultivate. In terms of strength, it was not any weaker than the original. Even so, he was still killed by Nie Tian with a single slash. Even her main body couldn't get within 100 meters of Nie Tian. At the moment when Nie Tian's sword shadow landed, Lian Wuni could truly feel how strong and terrifying his sword intent was. That kind of oppressive aura almost made her feel despair. How sharp is my sword? You can try it. Nie Tian's face was cold, and his terrifying murderous intent and sword intent merged into one in the void. It was like a net that covered the sky, and it shrouded Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni. Nie Tian, it won't do you any good if you kill me now. Shangguan Hong's expression changed rapidly, and his voice became a little hoarse, as if he was under great pressure. He didn't want to fight with Nie Tian head-on. Even with Lian Wuni's help, he didn't have much confidence. Shangguan Hong, do you think I will let you live after you massacred the Heavenly Martial Association? Nie Tianling said coldly. He stomped his foot and shot up into the sky. The sword aura around his body was like a mountain that rose from the ground, causing the void around him to shake violently. When Shangguan Hong heard Nie Tian's words and saw Nie Tian's imposing manner, he could not help but tremble violently. Then, he pointed at Wan Minghai, who was high up in the sky, and said, Nie Tian, you better think this through. If you kill me, you will have to face your Lord Saint. Nie Tian smiled and said indifferently, Do you think Wan Minghai will still dare to enter the array if I kill you with a single slash? This. Shangguan Hong's expression changed drastically, and he gasped. He was momentarily speechless. It turned out that this was Nie Tian's plan. Indeed, the reason why Wan Minghai forced Shangguan Hong and Lian Wuni to enter the array was because he was afraid of Nie Tian. If Nie Tian killed Shangguan Hong with a single slash, Wan Minghai would definitely be even more afraid, and he would even more not dare to enter the array. Brother, what are you afraid of? We won't be afraid of this kid if we join forces. Lian Wuni, on the other hand, did not show much fear. She spoke coldly, and her eyes became bloodshot, making her look extremely terrifying. Shangguan Hong's eyes darkened as he nodded. If he continued to avoid the battle, it would be equivalent to waiting for his death. If he joined forces with Lian Wuni, he might have a chance of winning. Come on, let me see how strong you are when you join forces. Nie Tian smiled faintly as his eyes shone with a frosty light. Outside his body, the sword momentum was still soaring. It was as if he was an endless abyss of swords, possessing endless sword intent. Brother! Lian Wuni's eyes trembled slightly as she sensed the fluctuation of sword intent in the void. Shangguan Hong nodded. His body trembled, and a majestic dragon aura was emitted from his body. His body then exploded, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a pitch-black giant dragon. Very good. Nie Tian looked at the giant black dragon that was more than 1,000 meters long, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, his eyes were filled with a playful look. He had seen Shangguan Hong's 9-yin candle dragon not long ago. At this moment, Shangguan Hong was in the 9 limits formation, but the body of the 9-yin candle dragon did not weaken. In fact, it was even stronger than before. At this moment, Lian Wuni also made a move. She formed a seal with both hands, and suddenly, a blood-red rune surged out and quickly covered the body of the giant black dragon. It was as if the body of the giant dragon was covered with a layer of armor. Nie Tian's eyes froze when he saw this. He could sense that the power of the 9-yin illuminating dragon had almost doubled in an instant. Evidently, Lian Wuni had used the power of the 6 calamities flower to strengthen the power of the 9-yin candle dragon. Nie Tian did not expect a small 6 calamities flower to have such terrifying power. Roar! At that moment, the dark dragon clad in blood-red armor let out an angry roar. Then, its body surged forward like an enormous mountain, directly pressing down on Nie Tian. Good timing! Nie Tian's lips twitched and he raised the sky sword in his hand before he slashed it down. In the void, sword radiance was released, and the dazzling sword radiance extended for thousands of meters. It was like a waterfall of light and shadow, and it was extremely dazzling. However, under this magnificent beauty, there was a boundless murderous intent hidden deep within. In the next moment, the dazzling sword radiance descended, and a sharp aura enveloped the surroundings. It instantly swept past the body of the giant dragon. Boom! Time and space seemed to have stopped for a few seconds. The giant dragon's body paused in the air for a moment, before it suddenly shook violently, and the blood-red armor shattered. Following this, the dragon's scales shattered, and the dragon aura dissipated crazily. Chapter 46-76. In the void, the sword radiance struck like lightning. An extreme murderous intent filled the air, and the gigantic dragon's body crumbled in an instant. Blood and flesh filled the sky, and the earth was dyed red. It was a tragic sight. 9 limits formation. Nie Tian had killed the dragon with a single slash. The wind was cold and murderous. The entire world was engulfed in boundless darkness, as if it was a sign of the coming of nirvana. In the sky, Nie Tianling stood straight like a sword. His eyes looked extremely evil under the fiend god inverse inscription. On the other side, Lian Wuni was in a daze. The 9-yin candle dragon, who had the 6 calamities blood armor, was killed by Nie Tian with a single slash. Was she dreaming? She recalled that she had once killed a divine ancestor in the 9th level of the Heaven Martial Arts realm with Shangguan Hong's blood armor. At that time, they were only at the intermediate level of the Heaven Martial Arts realm. Now that they had joined forces, they could even fight against a Heaven Execution Pinnacle cultivator. However, they couldn't even block a single slash from Nie Tian, who was protected by the 9 Limits formation. Was Nie Tian too powerful, or was the 9 Limits formation too terrifying? Wan Minghai, who was watching everything from above the formation, was also shocked. Even though he was separated by the 9 Limits formation, he could still clearly sense how powerful the Blood Armor Dragon was. Even though the Blood Armor Dragon wasn't a threat to him, it wouldn't be easy for him to defeat it. On the other hand, Nie Tian had killed the dragon with a single slash. It was too terrifying, and Nie Tian's cultivation was only at the 2nd level of the Heaven Perception realm. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Wan Minghai would never have believed that such a terrifying existence existed in this world. It's your turn. At this moment Nie Tian spoke. His cold voice sounded like a death knell from hell, and Lien Wuni, who was in a daze, was shocked. You. Lien Wuni's voice was trembling. She didn't know what to say, but she didn't manage to finish her sentence. Nie Tian moved immediately. He attacked Lien Wuni like a ray of sword radiance. Lien Wuni felt as if she had been imprisoned. She wanted to escape, but her legs felt extremely heavy, and she couldn't move at all. In an instant she felt an ice-cold killing intent. This was the aura of death. It would only take a moment to completely drown her. Nie Tian, wait. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded, causing Nie Tian's body to freeze. He stopped less than 10 meters away from Lien Wuni. Lien Wuni could feel the sword-intent aura around the young swordsman in front of her, and her body couldn't help but tremble violently. She had never seen a swordsman cultivate his sword intent to such an extent. And this terrifying swordsman was an extremely young swordsman. Lord Qingren. Nie Tian didn't turn around and just called out softly. Just now, it was precisely because Qingren spoke that he stopped in time. I need her help. Qingren spoke in a deep voice and didn't say anything else. Nie Tian furrowed his brows. With a single thought, a beam of sword intent tore through the air like light and water, and it accurately entered the center of Lien Wugi's forehead. What have you done? Lien Wuni felt her soul shake, and her entire body seemed to be covered by an invisible force. She had an illusion that this body didn't belong to her anymore. Go over and help. Do whatever he asks you to do. If you have any disobedience or disloyalty, I'll make sure you suffer a fate worse than death. Nie Tian Tianling spoke coldly. His eyes were like an abyss, and they emitted an extremely dark aura. Lien Wuni couldn't help but shiver. She couldn't believe that such a young cultivator would have such a terrifying look in his eyes. What exactly had this swordsman experienced? At the next moment, before she could even react, she was pushed into the eye of the array by a soft force. Qingren glanced at Lien Wuni and didn't say a word. He only nodded. He had underestimated the power of the myriad calamities bloodwood, and he needed the help of Lien Wuni's 6 calamities flower. Nie Tian turned around and fixed his gaze on Wan Minghai. They looked at each other and didn't speak for a long time. Nie Tian, I didn't expect you to be this strong. Wan Minghai was the first to speak. Why don't we make a deal? Speak. Nie Tian Tianling replied coldly. I know that you're being hunted by the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion and the Human Emperor's Palace. As long as you're willing to hand over your son, the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion and the Human Emperor's Palace won't be a problem anymore. Wan Minghai's eyes narrowed as he spoke with a profound look. The corners of Nie Tian's lips curled up as he sneered. How arrogant of you to look down on the Human Emperor Palace and the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. I'm really curious, who's behind you? Don't worry about that. Since I dare to speak, I naturally have the strength to go against the Human Emperor's Palace. Wan Minghai felt hopeful when he saw that Nie Tian didn't reject him directly. Everything can be discussed as long as you nod your head. You and I are both martial artists. You should know that at our level, the so-called kinship and blood relationship is just something that is dispensable. Your son isn't destined to live for long. Isn't it a form of relief for you to give him up? Bulsh *t. Nie Tian's gaze darkened like a raging beast as he growled, "In your eyes, the heavenly Tao is nothing but child's play. However, in my eyes, it's the so-called dispensable things that have supported me to this point. If you can give up your own flesh and blood and make a deal with him, how are you any different from beasts? Even if someone like that stands at the peak, he's just a pile of *t. The sonorous sound was like thunder. Wan Minghai's expression changed, and he didn't know what to say. He could sense that Nie Tian was different from all the other martial artists he had met. Martial artist. Guts. However, as a martial artist's strength grew stronger, the hot-bloodedness in their bodies became less and less, until it completely disappeared in the end. As for Nie Tian, his guts did not diminish as he grew stronger. Instead, it grew stronger. Perhaps this was the reason why Nie Tian was able to make it this far. As he had said, it was the heavenly Tao and his blood ties that had supported him to this point. One must have perseverance. Even in the face of death, one must not let go of the perseverance in one's heart. Well said, very well said. At this moment, a deep voice boomed in the sky as a figure descended. His aura was so oppressive that the heavens and earth seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. An expert. Wan Minghai's eyes widened as he sensed the aura of the person who had just arrived. His expression changed. He could sense that the other party's aura was no weaker than his. In fact, it was even stronger than his. "I am the Saint Protector of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, Fang Junxian." The person looked at Wan Minghai and spoke calmly. However, his aura was as deep as the ocean and continued to grow stronger. Fang Junxian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Fang Junxian. He was no stranger to this person. Not long ago, Fang Junxian had appeared at the Fengtian sect. Chapter 46-77. How could Nie Tian forget about the Heavenly Tao Sacred Protector Fang Junxian? During the Sky Beacon selection, Fang Junxian had appeared and challenged the Fengtian sect. Fang Junxian's first battle was against one of the four evil lords of the ghost race, Flower, Snow, and Moon, Supreme Flower, Hua Qiqiao. In Feng Wua had asked Hua Qiqiao to help Nie Tian back then, but he had been defeated by Fang Junxian and had almost lost his life. However, Hua Qiqiao had been heavily injured back then, so it was normal for him to lose to Fang Junxian. After that, Fang Junxian's opponent was the leader of the Three Swords of the Abyss, the Seven Cruel Sword, Duguji. That battle had been earth-shattering. Fang Junxian had been forced to use the power of the sun-devouring Golden Crow against Duguji's superb sword Dao cultivation, but he had still lost to Duguji's Dihong. Fortunately, Yuan Tianjili had appeared in time and weakened Dihong's power. Otherwise, Fang Junxian would have died on the spot. However, Fang Junxian hadn't died back then, but he had been gravely injured and shouldn't have been able to recover so quickly. Could it be that Fang Junxian had received help from some great figure or had some fortuitous encounter? Nie Tian, we meet again. Fang Junxian's eyes were bright and cold as he locked on to Nie Tian from afar. His aura was as deep as the sea, unfathomable. Lord Sacred Protector, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he responded in a deep voice. He could faintly sense that Fang Junxian's aura had changed slightly, and it was an extremely strange change. Although this change was so subtle that it was almost undetectable, it represented a qualitative improvement. There was no doubt that Fang Junxian was stronger than he had been during the Sky Beacon selection. Nie Tian, I was unfortunately injured that day, so I didn't get to see the earth-shattering battle between you and Yuan Tianjili. It's really a pity. Fang Juanxian's eyes were cold as he said, I did not expect that the Feng Tiansek's heavenly beacon blood sacrifice could raise your strength to such a level. As he said that, his gaze darkened and he laughed. I just don't know how much this 9 limits great array from the ultimate martial evil heaven can raise you? Nie Tian's face grew grim, and the sharpness in his eyes faded as he looked at Fang Junxian. He didn't expect Fang Junxian to not only know about the sky beacon blood sacrifice, but also see through the 9 limits formation at a glance. Wan Minghai frowned as he listened. Fang Junxian's sudden arrival made it hard for him to tell if he was a friend or foe. Surprised, Fang Junxian smiled when he saw Nie Tian's silence. He glanced at Qing Ren in the eye of the formation and said, Back then, little brother Qing Ren was captured by me, and the one who saved him was Hayakuten. So that's how it is. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he understood many things. Qing Ren had said that he was investigating Dong Wang Jingrong's death, but was captured. It was Hayakuten who saved him, brought him to the primordial galaxy, and even gave him pointers in cultivation. So Qing Ren was captured by Fang Junxian. No wonder the latter knew about the 9 limits formation and that it came from Hayakuten. I have always been brooding over my defeat to Hayakuten. Today, I see the 9 limits formation again. It can be considered a kind of fate. Fang Junxian sensed the aura of the 9 limits formation, and his eyes flashed with a different aura. Lord Xietian was stronger than you back then, and he's even stronger now. Nie Tian's lips twitched coldly as he said, Today, I will use Lord Xietian's 9 limits formation to defeat you again. Is that so? Fang Junxian chuckled disdainfully. I'm not a top figure, but I'm not an ordinary person either. If I can't even compare to a mere second-layer heaven perception sacred emperor and a 9 limits formation, then I don't need to be a heavenly sacred protector. Upon hearing Fang Juanxian's words, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up even wider as he laughed and said, You said it yourself, Lord Holy Protector. Don't blame me if you can't be a heavenly sacred protector. Presumptuous! Fang Junxian roared as his eyes flickered coldly. As a heavenly sacred protector, he was already thinking highly of Nie Tian by speaking to him calmly. Nie Tian acted as if he had a card up his sleeve. Did he really think that the heavenly sacred protector was someone to be trifled with? Lord Sacred Protector, this kid's strength is strange, and he's extremely cunning. He's trying to provoke you. Wan Minghai smirked at Fang Junxian. Why don't you and I work together to break his 9 limits formation? Fang Junxian smirked. I will break the formation myself. I won't stop you if you want to do something else. Wan Minghai nodded with a smile. You're very straightforward, Lord Sacred Protector. Anyone else would have rejected working together with Wan Minghai. After all, it would be embarrassing for them to work together due to the difference in their statuses. However, Fang Junxian was extremely cunning. He neither agreed nor rejected Wan Minghai's offer. This meant that he wouldn't stop Wan Minghai from attacking him while he was fighting Nie Tian. In fact, it was no different from them working together. Lord Sacred Protector is indeed shrewd. Nie Tian has learned his lesson. How could Nie Tian not know what Fang Junxian was trying to say? However, he had no choice but to mock him. Come on. How could Fang Junxian care about all this? With a low grunt, his silhouette flickered and he appeared in the middle of the 9 limits grand formation. At the same time, Wan Minghai also moved. He passed through the 9 limits formation and landed on the other side. This is bad. Nie Tian cursed inwardly as he glanced at the two of them. If it was just Fang Junxian and Wan Minghai alone, he could handle them. However, it would be too troublesome if the two of them entered the formation at the same time. If he was entangled by Fang Junxian and Wan Minghai attacked Qing Ren and Ye Fan, how would he be able to deal with both of them? Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that a heavenly sacred protector would have to work together to deal with a junior like me. Nye Tion's lips curled into a cold smile as he gathered his sword will. His celestial demon inverse marks had already covered his entire body. He couldn't hold back against Fang Junxian. He had to give it his all. Nye Tian, you don't have to provoke me. I only want to fight you. I don't care what others do. Fang Junxian wasn't about to fall for his trick. Lord Sacred Protector, make your move. Before he could finish his sentence, Wan Minghai's voice rang out from the other side. Fang Junxian frowned, but he still moved and waved his hand in the air. Instantly, a majestic aura shot up to the sky. Like a volcano eruption, the aura turned into an endless stream of flames that pressed down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian's expression darkened as he sensed the blazing aura assaulting his face. At the same time, Wan Minghai moved as well. His speed was so fast that he looked like a ray of light. Their targets were Qing Rin and Yefan, who were in the eye of the formation. Chapter 46-78. In the Nine Limits formation, Fang Junxian and Wan Minghai moved at the same time. One attacked Nye Tian, while the other attacked the person in the eye of the formation. Damn it! Nye Tian's pupils constricted. With a low grunt, the wings of the astral soul appeared on his back. While he was still in the air, the sword intent in his body exploded. The sword of the sky slashed at Wan Minghai. Wan Minghai stood in the air. Feeling the immense pressure on his head, he smirked and formed a strange seal with his hands. However, the next moment, his expression changed completely. He was in a state of panic. At the critical moment, he formed an immortal seal with his hands to block Nye Tian's sword. Bam! With a dull thud, Wan Minghai's body sank in the air and flew backward. He only managed to stabilize himself after retreating a few hundred meters. Blood trickled down the corner of his mouth. He stared at Nye Tian in shock and indignation. Just now, he had wanted to use a space-time technique to dodge Nye Tian's sword. However, he did not expect that he could not use his space-time technique in the Nine Limits formation. Fortunately, he formed an immortal seal in time. Otherwise, he would have been severely injured. He had been too careless. He did not realize that the Nine Limits formation also restricted spacetime. Boom! At the same time, a terrifying flame whistled through the air, forcing Nye Tian to retreat repeatedly and shattering the sword intent around him. In the blink of an eye, the flames closed in, and the blazing aura burned everything. At the critical moment, Nye Tian decisively gave up on the wings of the astral soul and used the power of his wings to block the flame. He then steadied himself. You managed to block one of my attacks. Not bad. Fang Junxian's eyes narrowed. Although he was surprised, the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. Nye Tian let out a long breath and steadied his breath. The tense expression on his face gradually eased. He had seen Fang Junxian fight before. His strength was no weaker than the Heaven Dao Pavilion leader, Yun Etian. Now that they were fighting, he could truly feel how terrifying Fang Junxian was. Nye Tian, it appears that the increase in strength that the Nine Limits formation has given you is far inferior to the heavenly beacon blood sacrifice. However, with your current strength, how are you going to fight against me? Fang Junxian's eyes were filled with murderous intent and the flames around him burned fiercely like the sun. Holy Protector, you've underestimated the Nine Limits formation. Nye Tian's countenance darkened as he laughed coldly. After which, the astral energy within his body erupted forth as boundless astral light gushed out like tidal waves, flooding the entire Nine Limits grand formation. A world within a formation. Interesting. The corners of Fang Junxian's lips curled into a faint smile as he sensed the change in the atmosphere. Never did he expect that Nye Tian would be able to create another spirit formation in the Nine Limits grand formation. That's right, Nye Tian had activated the Forbidden Space boundary. Using the Starry River Forbidden Space to support the Nine Limits grand formation, He strived to unleash the power of the stars to the extreme. However, this is still too weak. Fang Juanxian's eyes were blazing like fire as he displayed his insolence. The flames around him surged like tidal waves, crashing against the void and producing a series of rumbling noises. Is that so? Nie Tianling swept a cold glance at Wan Minghai before he took a step forward. Sword intent surged out from his body and boundless sword qi spread out like ripples, colliding with the flames in the void. Boom boom boom! The sword qi and the flames collided, producing ear-piercing noises. However, the scene was extremely beautiful. The two opposing energies interweaved together, fusing and devouring each other. It was as if lava was dancing in the mouth of a volcano. Wan Minghai stared at the two of them in shock. He had never expected that Nie Tian would be so powerful in the Nine Limits Grand Formation. Very well. How about you try my sun-devouring golden crow? Fang Junxian could sense the sharpness of Nie Tian's sword qi and could not help but feel worried. Thus, he no longer concealed his strength and directly summoned the sun-devouring golden crow. Sun-devouring golden crow. Mu Tian's pupils constricted when he heard that name. Fang Junxian had also used the sun-devouring golden crow during the sky beacon selection against Duguji. The sun-devouring golden crow was unimaginably powerful. It had easily broken through Duguji's sword qi shield and almost killed Duguji. If Duguji did not have the power of Dihong, he would have been the one defeated that day. Moreover, Nie Tian knew that the sun-devouring golden crow was similar to the 9 extreme chaos beast, the night elephant and the thunder ape. They were all yuan beasts of heaven and earth. Their strength was unimaginable. Come on! Fang Junxian roared and took a step forward. His aura exploded like an avalanche, sweeping everything in its path. At that moment, a hidden power in his body was fully awakened. PFFF. A layer of strange scarlet flame appeared around Fang Junxian's body. He flipped his hand and the scarlet flame shot out like a sharp blade towards Nie Tian. Boom! In the next instant, the scarlet flame exploded in the sky and spread into a sea of fire. It was like a heavenly river that came crashing down. Nie Tian's pupils constricted. He realized that there was no way to avoid it. The flames of the golden crow can burn everything. Rest in peace in these flames. Fang Junxian stood in the sea of fire like an ancient god of fire. His deep voice sounded like the horn of death. In the next moment, before Nie Tian could even react, he was engulfed by the sea of flames. This person is so powerful. Wan Minghai was dumbfounded by the scene before him. His astonishment was indescribable. He had thought that Fang Junxian would need to use some tricks to defeat Nie Tian with the help of the 9 Limits Formation. He did not expect that Fang Junxian would have a trump card like the sun-devouring golden crow to incinerate Nie Tian. Nie Tian, you were supposed to be a genius, but you chose the wrong path. Fang Junxian's lips twitched as he looked at the sea of fire around him. There was a tinge of regret on his face. Although he and Nie Tian were enemies, he had to admit that Nie Tian was the most talented person he had ever seen. In fact, he was the one who could break through the bottleneck. It was a pity that Nie Tian was on the opposing side of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. That was why he had to die. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion would not tolerate the existence of such a person. Lord Sacred Protector, you are too confident in your sun-devouring golden crow. Just as Fang Junxian finished speaking, a mocking and disdainful voice rang out from the blazing flames. Fang Junxian was taken aback and his expression changed drastically. That was Nie Tian's voice. Nie Tian was not dead? But how was that possible? Even a pinnacle heavenly martial artist would not be able to withstand the flames of the golden crow, much less a stage 2 heaven perception cultivator. This was the sun-devouring golden crow, one of the 9 great elemental beasts. Are you surprised? At this moment, Nie Tian's voice rang out again, following which a figure shot up into the sky, broke through the layers of flames, and stood on top of them. How is that possible? Staring at Nie Tian, Fang Juanxian's pupils shrank as he exclaimed in shock. At this moment, Nie Tian was clad in a suit of dazzling starlight armor. Under his feet was a huge furnace that was burning with a strange flame. This was the furnace that had blocked the Golden Crow's flames. Chapter 46-79. Fang Junxian stared at Nie Tian in disbelief. He had never imagined that someone in this world could withstand the Golden Crow's flames. The furnace under Nie Tian's feet was also unleashing flames, which were pure flame power. It was this furnace's flames that had protected Nie Tian from the Golden Crow's flames. But what was this power? How could it resist the Golden Crow's flames? Nie Tian, what power is this? After a long while, Fang Junxian calmed down a little and spoke in a deep voice. Nie Tian smiled faintly. The power of the stars. That's right, he was using the power of the stars. The starlight armor he wore was the sky-shrouding sacred armor formed from the sky-shrouding totem. The furnace beneath his feet was the crucible of hell. The Golden Crow's flames were indeed terrifying. If not for Nie Tian's various methods, he would have been reduced to a pile of ash. Even the Golden Crow's flames were somewhat suppressed by the Nine Limits formation and the Starry River lockdown. This weakened the power of the Golden Crow's flames to a certain extent. The sacred flames of the Crucible of Hell blocked most of the Golden Crow's flames. Coupled with the protection of the sky-shrouding sacred armor, Nie Tian was able to resist the flames. But even so, he still felt the intense pain of being burned by the raging fire. It was just that his martial body was strong and his willpower was strong enough that he wasn't afraid of pain. The power of the stars allowed a second-tier sky perception's sacred emperor like you to resist the Golden Crow's flames. Fang Juanxian's eyes were cold and murderous. Nie Tian was only a second-tier sky perception sacred emperor, but he was able to use the power of the stars to resist the Golden Crow's flames. This was terrifying. The Golden Crow was a primal beast of heaven and earth. Even a ninth-tier sky martial sacred ancestor would be burned to ashes in an instant if they didn't have special powers. Nie Tian was still weak, but he was already so strong. Given time, he would be unimaginably terrifying. Lord Sacred Protector, your strength shouldn't be limited to just this. Give it your all. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he said coldly. At the same time, he was also observing Wan Minghai's every move. As long as the latter dared to make a move, he would definitely stop him even if he had to risk getting injured. As you wish. Fang Juanxian's lips curled into a cold smile as he growled, I don't believe that a mere 9 limits array can give me the power to resist the Golden Crow's flames. Boom! With a flip of Fang Juanxian's hand, the Golden Crow flames around him began to surge. The scorching qi instantly engulfed the entire 9 limits formation, as if the entire place had turned into a furnace. Wan Minghai's expression changed drastically, and he was horrified. At this moment, not to mention attacking Qing Ren, it was already extremely difficult for him to survive within the aura of the Golden Crow. He had not expected Fang Juanxian's strength to be this terrifying. What was even more unbelievable was that Nie Tian was able to face Fang Junxian head-on. At this moment, he was extremely glad that he did not enter the 9 limits formation alone. Otherwise, he would have most likely died under Nie Tian's sword. Howl! At this moment, the Golden Crow flames condensed into a giant Golden Crow in the void. The originally scorching flames were now pitch black due to the high degree of fusion, resembling a giant metallic bird that glowed with a golden light. What a terrifying aura! Is this the strongest form of the sun-devouring Golden Crow? Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he felt the scorching aura rushing towards him. The aura of the black flames in the form of the Golden Crow was completely incomparable to that of the Golden Crow's flames. It seemed to be a power that surpassed all other flames. Nie Tian, you can die in peace now that you can see the sun-devouring Golden Crow's soul beast form before you die. Fang Junxian was confident that the moment the golden crow descended would be the moment that Nie Tian would perish. Nie Tian's eyes were as deep as the abyss. His devil god inverse mark had been activated to the extreme, and his devil god body appeared once more. Even so, his aura was still suppressed by the golden crow. Even the crucible of hellfire beneath his feet was shaking violently, as if it could not hold on any longer. "Let's end this." Fang Junxian's voice rang out once more, like the wails of hell and the tolling of death bells. "Howl!" Immediately afterwards, the golden crow let out another cry, and shot directly towards Nie Tian like a streak of black light that carried the power of death. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the crucible of hellfire beneath Nie Tian's feet shattered into a stream of flames. Following that, cracks appeared on Nie Tian's sky-shrouding sacred armor as well. Then, like a spider web, it began to crumble. In the blink of an eye, the golden crow had removed all of Nie Tian's defenses. Right now, Nie Tian was using his flesh and blood to resist the golden crow's flames. The pain of being burned by the flames made him feel as if his body had fallen into a state of nothingness. He couldn't even feel his body. 9 limits of the starry sky, ultimate primal chaos. Nie Tian struggled to lift his arm, and the sky sword slashed down. Boundless sword will converged, transforming into an enormous sword shadow that met the golden crow head-on. Ultimate primal chaos was the strongest move of the 9 limits of the starry sky. Within the 9 limits grand formation, the ultimate primal chaos combined the power of the stars and the power of the defiant stars to unleash an unprecedented level of power. Whiz! The sword's shadow was like a mountain, and the cry of the sword pierced through heaven and earth. Off to the side, Wan Minghai was stunned. Like a frightened kitten, he unleashed all of his power so that he wouldn't be affected. He never imagined that the battle between Nie Tian and Fang Junxian would reach such a level. Honestly speaking, if he was the one fighting Fang Junxian, he might not even be able to withstand the golden crow's flames, let alone the golden crow's primordial beast form. Bang! In the next moment, the two extreme forces collided, and a muffled explosion sounded in the world. It was like the rumble of the beginning of the world. Bang! The next moment, the sword's shadow wavered slightly and paused in the air before collapsing, transforming into boundless sword will that was swallowed by the golden crow. Even with the 9 limits grand formation and the strongest move of the 9 limits of the starry sky, they still couldn't withstand the golden crow's form. However, after the violent collision, the golden crow could no longer maintain its golden crow form. It dissipated in the air and transformed into boundless golden crow flames that engulfed Nie Tian like a sea of fire. Boom, boom, boom. The boundless flames rolled like a carnival from hell, burning away all life energy. Nie Tian, you are still too weak. In the end, you still lost to the sun-devouring golden crow. Fang Junxian looked at the raging flames with a faint smile on his face. He had the posture of a victor. After losing all of his defenses, Nie Tian was buried in the golden crow's flames. There was no chance of survival. Chapter 4680. Fang Jun's eyes lit up like torches and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile, as if he could already see Wan Minghai curled up in the formation, not daring to make a single sound. He knew it was extremely terrifying, but he didn't expect it to be this terrifying. After a long time, the fire began to weaken, and soon after the flames completely disappeared, the figure from afar seemed to have a vague human figure. Fang Jun was a little confused. Could it be that he wasn't burned to ashes? But he had the protection of the stars, but his flesh and blood remained intact? This was too terrifying. As far as Fang Jun knew, no one in the world, not even the legendary former human emperor Yu the Heavens, could resist it with his martial body. You know how terrifying Wan Minghai was when he stared at that unimaginable martial body from afar. That's fine too. I can take this corpse with me for a moment and then carve it into the charred corpse. He seemed to have sensed something and his expression changed drastically. Wan Minghai was subconsciously called out by Fang Jun. At this moment, the strange sound of the charred corpse sounded like bones breaking or joints being reset. Fang Jun's eyes had practically turned into a charred corpse. But this was even a peak martial artist who had cultivated his martial body to the pinnacle. Wan Minghai was completely stunned and then charred black. Then 2 pairs of disbelieving body pieces fell off and replaced them with crystal clear and crimson red pieces. Fang Jun's eyes suddenly widened as he saw that he wasn't burned or even dead. That's right. At this moment, the charred black pieces of body grew back. Fang Jun's eyes trembled as his brain worked frantically, but he couldn't think of anything. At this moment, Wan Minghai faintly sensed that Fang Jun was stunned and his expression changed drastically. Just as Wan Minghai had said, he was clearly there, but according to what he knew, after being stripped away by the ultimate martial evil, he would no longer have any connection with the host and would even cause the host to fall into a state where he had clearly been stripped away. But at this moment the body pieces began to crack rapidly. The crystal clear and crimson red Fang Jun couldn't help but tremble with shock. He clearly sensed that there were 9 supreme beings in the 9 great chaos, and 3 of the 9 supreme beings had actually stopped the cracking of the charred corpse pieces and instead embedded them deep into the new body like sharp blade. Wan Minghai saw this idiot in a daze, and he stared at Wan Minghai with cold eyes and roared angrily. Chapter 4681. Wan Minghai's figure flickered, but not to kill Nie Tian. Instead, he charged toward Qing Ren and Yefan, who were in the eye of the array. Of course, he had his own reasons for not attacking Nie Tian. On one hand, he wasn't completely confident that he could kill Nie Tian. On the other hand, he believed that even if he killed Nie Tian, Fang Junxian might not let him take Nie Fan away. Therefore, he might as well take Nie Fan away while the two were in a stalemate. Bastard! How could Fang Junxian not know what Wan Minghai was thinking? But he had no choice but to curse. If he left Nie Tian alone, he couldn't even begin to imagine how terrifying Nie Tian's strength would be after his transformation. At this moment, his only option was to kill Nie Tian. Otherwise, only death awaited him. The 3-legged shackles were formed from the flames of the Golden Crow and possessed a powerful burning power. Even though Nie Tian possessed the power of the primordial 9-level primordial beast, it was difficult for him to resist the pressure of the shackles. As the pieces of the charred corpse slowly seeped into his body, Nie Tian's originally translucent skin turned black once again. If the flames of the Golden Crow entered his body again, Nie Tian would not be able to escape even with the power of the primordial 9-level primordial beast. Nie Tian, you're dead this time. Fang Juanxian's face was filled with a murderous glint. This was a battle of life and death. If he couldn't kill Nie Tian, then he would be defeated. Is that so? At this moment of life and death, Nie Tian suddenly opened his eyes, revealing a pair of eyes that were as dark as the abyss, which looked extremely frightening. In the blink of an eye, the power of the celestial demonic eyes was unleashed. An invisible force covered the entire 9 limits formation. Fang Junxian sensed a strange aura, and his sinister expression abruptly changed. This strange aura filled the eye power. It was clearly a terrifying, devouring power. Is he crazy? He's trying to devour the power of the Golden Crow. Fang Jun instantly understood. He couldn't believe that Nie Tian wanted to directly devour the power of the Golden Crow. After all, the energy of the Golden Crow was an extremely terrifying burning energy. Wasn't forcefully devouring it the same as courting death? However, Nie Tian didn't have the slightest bit of apprehension as he madly absorbed the Golden Crow's energy, completely ignoring the intense pain of his body being torn apart. At this moment, Nie Tian's body was filled with terrifying eye bloodline power. And Nie Tian was going to use the power of the fiend god Eye to forcefully devour the power of the Golden Crow. As Nie Tian continued to absorb the Golden Crow's energy, the charred pieces of flesh surrounding his body gradually disappeared, turning into golden crow flames that poured into his limbs and meridians like raging torrents. Let me see what kind of strength you possess to actually dare to devour the power of the golden crow. Fang Juanxian's face was ferocious as he growled. The third progenitor's restraining power increased and the black chains wrapped around Nie Tian. On the other side, Wan Minghai stepped into the void and directly arrived outside the formation eye. He looked at Qing Rin and Nie Fan, who were inside the formation eye, with a cold smile. Of course, he knew that he couldn't break the formation eye, but he didn't need to. All he had to do was enter the formation eye and take Nie Fan away. Nie Tian. Qingren glanced at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice. His entire body was already drenched in sweat. He had almost exhausted all his energy to save Nie Fan, and this was even with Lian Wuni's help. If Wan Minghai entered the formation eye, he wouldn't be able to resist at all and could only watch as Wan Minghai took Nie Fan away. Me, Mr. Qing, let's go. Lian Wuni was also a little flustered as she spoke in a trembling voice. Lian Wuni, listen carefully. No matter what happens, you can't leave even half a step. Qing Ren glared at her cold and said in a deep voice, if Nie Tian dies, the restraining power in your body will explode and kill you instantly. So, you'd better pray that Nie Tian can win this battle. XDW8 Qing Ren had to admit that he didn't expect the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion to send out Fang Junxian. To be honest, the fact that Nie Tian was able to hold on until now was already beyond his expectations. But at this moment, Nie Tian still had to hold on. As long as Nie Tian held on, they would have hope. This formation eye is a little complicated, but it won't stop me for long. Wan Minghai smiled as immortal runes surged on his palms, and he began to slowly tear apart the inscriptions in the formation eye. Damn it! Qing Ren snorted as he glanced at Nie Tian. Then, he ignored everything else and focused on saving Nie Fan. The formation eye wouldn't be able to stop Wan Minghai for long. Nie Tian had to defeat Fang Junxian as soon as possible. Nie Tian, die. At this moment, Fang Junxian had already trapped Nie Tian with his three-legged shackles. With a low growl, the black chains tightened and sank deep into Nie Tian's body. Instantly, wounds appeared all over Nie Tian's body, and fresh blood gushed out. But he didn't seem to notice it at all. The power of the fiend god in his body continued to devour the golden crow's flames. At this moment, his blood, bones, and nerves were all undergoing the most intense test. Even the word purgatory wasn't enough to describe what Nie Tian was experiencing. At this moment, the black chains had already sunk deep into Nie Tian's flesh. One could even hear the crisp sound of bones cracking in the air. If the black chains tightened a little more, Nie Tian would have been dismembered. Boom! But at this moment, a surge of energy exploded from Nie Tian's body. He shook violently, and his aura soared into the sky. Bang! 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 In the next instant, three cracking sounds could be heard at the same time, as the three black chains were broken into pieces. How is this possible? Fang Junxian was so shocked by the scene before him that he let out a strange cry. He never imagined that Nie Tian would be able to devour the golden crow's power and even break through the three-legged shackles. Fang Junxian, your golden crow's power is only SOSO. Nie Tian's expression was dark. His dark eyes stared at Fang Junxian cold. Bloodline power. When Fang Junxian sensed the aura of the celestial demon eyes, he immediately felt a strange aura that made him very surprised. It was as if there was a special aura in Nie Tian's eyes. Have you heard of the Ouyang family's blood sand? With a cold laugh, Nie Tian stomped his foot madly, his aura surging and raging like a rainbow. Blood sand? Fang Junxian was stunned at first, then he exclaimed, How do you have the power of blood sand? He had only heard of the power of blood sand. It was rumored that the power of blood sand could devour a cultivator's flesh and blood. But Nie Tian was not a member of the Ouyang family. How could he possess the power of blood sand? What's the point of knowing the outcome when you're about to die? Nie Tianling snickered, a murderous glint flashing in his eyes. Back when he fought Ouyang Chang'e, his eyes had absorbed the power of blood sand and had undergone some changes. That was why he dared to risk his life to devour the Golden Crow's power. One had to admit that the Golden Crow's power was terrifying. If not for the power of blood sand, Nie Tian would have been a corpse by now. But Fang Junxian would never know about this. Chapter 4682. Within the Nine Limits formation, Fang Junxian was horrified. He had never imagined that he would lose this battle and that he would be slaughtered. Nie Tian, do you really think you can kill me? If you push me too far, I will take you down with me. Fang Junxian growled as he sensed Nie Tian's aura. Fang Junxian, do you think you have what it takes to take me down with you? Nie Tian snickered coldly as his aura surged wildly. His entire being was like a sword that could tear apart the heavens and earth. His entire body exuded a domineering aura. Your cultivation has increased? Fang Junxian's expression changed when he sensed that Nie Tian's aura had increased significantly. Nie Tian had forcefully swallowed the power of the Golden Crow. Not only did he not harm his martial body, but he was also able to fuse with the power of the Golden Crow in a short period of time. This meant that Nie Tian's martial body was much stronger than the average martial artist's and could adapt to different types of energy. Fang Junxian had to admit that he had underestimated Nie Tian from the beginning. Even though he knew that Nie Tian was not as weak as he appeared on the surface, he did not expect Nie Tian to be this strong. Fang Junxian, it's time to end this. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth. Then, he moved. Like a sharp sword, wherever he passed, space and time cracked. In an instant, Fang Junxian felt a strong murderous intent. It was as though time and space around him had been locked down by a strange force. Murderous intent. This was an extremely powerful killing intent, one that could condense into a tangible killing intent, causing time and space to freeze. Fang Junxian was at his peak and had been through countless battles in his life. But at this moment, he felt as though he was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in front of Nie Tian. He had no way of fighting back. This feeling of hopelessness spread through his heart and made him cower before the battle even began. But he was a veteran of hundreds of battles and had been through countless life and death situations. In an instant, his eyes narrowed and the flames around him shot up to the sky. Boom! The power of the Golden Crow gushed out violently like a tempestuous wave, condensing into the form of the Golden Crow essence beast in the air. Fang Junxian had used the power of the Golden Crow several times and the Golden Crow flames in his body were almost completely exhausted. He forcefully released his Golden Crow essence beast form, obviously intending to fight to the death. But at this moment, Nie Tian had already rushed over, the sword intent around him surging, completely crushing the Golden Crow flames wherever he passed. How is this possible? Fang Junxian couldn't help but exclaim in disbelief at the sight before him. Never had he imagined that Nie Tian was actually completely unafraid of the Golden Crow flames. Nie Tian was like a sharp blade, stabbing straight into the Golden Crow. The moment the sword intent exploded, it surged in all directions. The Golden Crow origin beast form was actually unable to endure this impact, and it turned into countless flames as it collapsed. Fang Junxian's face contorted in disbelief. In the next moment, before he could even react, Nie Tian had already closed in on him. Crack! Then, a large hand reached out and gripped Fang Junxian's neck like a pair of iron pincers. Nie Tian, you! Fang Junxian struggled with all his might, but he could feel a powerful external force restraining him, rendering him immobile. The Heavenly Tao's sacred protector is nothing more than this. Nie Tian's eyes were bloodshot, his voice murderous, and his body was as cold as a 10,000-year ice cave. Crack! The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Fang Junxian's pupils constricted, and his life was gone in an instant. The heavenly Tao sacred protector was dead. Not far away, Wan Minghai was dumbfounded by the scene in front of him. His mouth was agape, but no sound came out. He had never imagined that Fang Junxian would be so powerful, but he would be killed by Nie Tian just like that. It's your turn. At that moment, Nie Tian's voice rang out again, and he appeared in front of Wan Minghai in a flash of light. Nie Tian, I. Wan Minghai could not react in time. When he looked up, Nie Tian was already less than 5 meters away from him. Who's behind you? Nie Tian asked coldly, his eyes cold. I can't say. Wan Minghai was taken aback at first, then he shook his head in disbelief. Since you won't speak, then die. Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and his murderous intent intensified. In the next moment, he took a step forward, and a gust of sword qi whizzed through the air. Virum. Wan Minghai's body trembled as he felt a buzzing sound in his body. It was the hum of a sword. Bang! His eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but there was no more time. His body trembled in the air, and sword qi exploded, turning him into a sea of red light. Fengtian immortal Wan Minghai was dead. After killing 2 powerful cultivators, Nie Tian did not seem to be smiling at all. Instead, he looked extremely cold. He knew that both Fang Junxian and Wan Minghai were backed by powerful forces. Next, he would have to face 2 powerful forces at the same time, and one could imagine how much pressure he would be under. This time, he was lucky that he had the 9 limits formation. Otherwise, the situation would have been completely different. Nie Tian took a deep breath, checked the eye of the formation, and retreated to one side after some simple repairs. Qing Ren had not finished treating Nie Fan, so he had to stay here. In the eye of the formation, Lien Wuni, who had witnessed everything, was completely dumbfounded. Initially, she had thought that Nie Tian was only a talented young cultivator, and that no matter how powerful he was, he could not be that powerful. She even had the feeling that she could kill Nie Tian with her own strength. But now, Nie Tian had killed 2 powerful cultivators right in front of her, and it was imaginable how shocked she was. To her, Fang Junxian and Wan Minghai were both powerful cultivators, but they had been killed by Nie Tian one after another. It was too terrifying. Just a moment ago, she was still thinking about how to escape from Nie Tian's control. But now, she actually felt that it was not bad to be able to stay by Nie Tian's side. Next, Nie Tian checked his own condition and sat down cross-legged. He had just devoured a portion of the Golden Crow's power, and his strength had increased, but he was still a little worried. He felt that the aura of the Golden Crow's power was a little strange, and it did not seem like the power of a soul beast. Furthermore, the strange thing was that when Fang Junxian was killed, the sun-devouring Golden Crow in his body did not appear, as if it had mysteriously disappeared. Someone is coming? At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt a majestic pressure coming from the sky. It was vast and endless, and it was even more terrifying than when Fang Junxian had descended. Who could have such an imposing aura? Nie Tian raised his head slowly, and from afar, he saw more than 10 black figures flying over from the horizon. Each of them had a majestic aura, and when they descended at the same time, they looked like a continuous mountain range. The 17th Sage Envoy. At this moment, Qing Ren also felt it, and he raised his head abruptly and exclaimed in shock. He had never expected that the 17th Sage Envoy of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion would appear. Chapter 4683. Qing Ren stared at the 17 figures in the sky. Apart from shock, there was more despair in his eyes. That's right, despair. He had never expected the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion to send out the 17 sacred envoys to kill Nie Tian. In the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion, the most famous people were the Heaven Tao Pavilion Master and the 2 Heaven Tao Saint Protectors. However, outsiders did not know that the most powerful people in the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion were not the Pavilion Master or the Saint Protectors, but the mysterious 17 sacred envoys. Very few people knew about the existence of the 17 sacred envoys, and these people called them the peak of the heaven Tao. Rumor had it that the 17 sacred envoys were the 17 Lai Wu elders of the heaven Tao sacred pavilion. Their cultivations were all at the peak of the heaven martial realm, and if they joined forces, they could kill an expert at the peak of the heaven martial realm instantly. Qing Ren only knew about the 17 sacred envoys because he had heard about them from Hayakuten. According to Hayakuten, he had once joined forces with Dong Wang Jingrong to investigate the internal situation of the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion. After they snuck into the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion, the Heaven Tao Pavilion Master was not around. However, they met the 17 sacred envoys in a secret place in the pavilion. The two of them fought against the 17 sacred envoys and were severely injured in just one move. After that, the two of them escaped and gradually found out about the existence of the 17 sacred envoys. The 17 sacred envoys were the strongest trump card of the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion. They would not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. Furthermore, the 17 sacred envoys rarely left the Saint Pavilion. This time, they had crossed the border for Nye Tian, which showed how much the Saint Pavilion valued Nye Tian. Just as Qing Ren was in shock, the 17 figures moved at the same time. Their aura swept across the sky and earth. The 17 of them landed in the 9 Limits Great Array, causing the entire array to shake violently, as though it could not withstand the pressure of the 17 of them. These people are so powerful! Nye Tian's pupils shrank as he was deeply shocked. Among all the experts he had seen, only those like the Yang God Sword Emperor could fight against the 17 of them. What was even more terrifying was that the auras of these 17 people were extremely similar. When released in the void, they could actually fuse together. Each of the 17 sacred envoys was no weaker than the heavenly Tao sacred protector Fang Junxian. The combined strength of the 17 of them was unimaginable. You are the variable in the plan, Nye Tian. One of the 17 sacred emissaries spoke, but none of them moved. Nye Tian couldn't tell who was speaking. You are the 17 sacred envoys. When Nye Tian heard Qing Ren's words, he secretly took a deep breath to calm himself down. That's right. The 17th emissary spoke again. His voice was cold and emotionless like a machine. Judging from your aura, it's almost as if you're one with the Grand Formation. It's not an injustice for Fang Junxian to die here. To kill Sage Emperor Tianjue, the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion actually sent out 17 sage envoys. This is really surprising. On the other side, Qing Ren's voice rang out, shouting loudly. Obviously, he was buying time for Nye Tian. However, so what if he managed to buy some time? At this moment, who could save them? With the strength of the 17 divine envoys, even Hayakuten might not be a match for them. Nye Tian, we're here to kill you. The 17 sacred emissaries did not move, but they had already noticed Qing Ren and the others. As long as you surrender, the people in the eye of the array can leave safely. You think I will surrender? You're underestimating me. Nye Tian's lips twitched as he secretly accumulated his sword intent. The power of the celestial demon eyes entered his body, activating the potential of the celestial demon body. Unfortunately, his aura was still a far cry from that of the 17 sacred emissaries. You overestimate yourself. Before he could finish his sentence, a low roar could be heard as a silhouette whistled through the air. Wherever the silhouette passed by, it was like a hurricane, stirring up violent waves in the air. Nye Tian instantly felt an oppressive aura. His expression changed as he slashed out with the sword in the sky. Even though his reaction was fast, he was still a step too slow. Wherever the hurricane passed, he was pushed back dozens of meters and spat out a mouthful of blood. How dare you talk nonsense with such strength? What a madman! The sacred emissary's voice was shrill. His figure was like an invisible wind, sweeping across the sky. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian's body was covered in a dozen bloody wounds. This person is so fast. Nie Tian endured the pain and ignored the wounds on his body. The sacred emissary was too fast, so fast that he could not see the sacred emissary at all. Also, this was only one sacred emissary. The other 16 sacred emissaries had yet to make a move. This is my last attack. I'm going to kill you. The sacred emissary shrieked in the air. Then, a hurricane swept across the sky, turning into thousands of wind blades that headed straight for Nie Tian. Watch out! Qingren couldn't help but exclaim when he saw this scene in the eye of the array. Nie Tianling stood still with a stern expression. He held his breath and only stared coldly at the sacred emissary. Bang! As the wind blades were about to land on him, a surge of sword intent rose from Nie Tian's body and penetrated the wind blades. It then transformed into a shadow of a sword that pressed down on the sacred emissary. Bang! Following this, a dull thud was heard as a figure was sent flying. It was the sacred emissary. How is this possible? The sacred emissary stabilized his figure and stared at Nie Tian in astonishment. He simply couldn't believe that Nie Tian had actually blocked his attack, and had even counterattacked and injured him. The 17 sacred emissaries are only SOSO. Nie Tian wore a cold expression as he taunted. You're courting death. The sacred emissary was enraged. He let out a roar and was about to attack again when he saw the other two figures making their move. Bang! Bang! In the air, two powerful forces descended at an extremely fast speed, making it difficult for one to blink. The shield of the astral soul appeared around Nie Tian's body again, but it disappeared in a flash. Although the shield of the astral soul was activated, it was instantly broken. Bang! Bang! In the next instant, Nie Tian felt his shoulders sink. His shoulder blades had cracked. His knees sank and he almost knelt down. You little ant, die! Two voices rang out at the same time, and a terrifying pressure suddenly descended. It was like a majestic wave, endless and endless. Crackle! Crackle! Nie Tian's body sank again, and the sound of his bones cracking could be heard. The pressure from two sacred emissaries was too much for Nie Tian to bear. However, Nie Tian did not fall. His face looked extremely hideous under the immense pressure. Even the celestial demon inscription seemed to be distorted. Young man, I would like to see how long you can last. On the other side, another sacred emissary attacked. His figure moved like an arrow that had just been released from a bow. He carried thousands of lightning auras and attacked Suemo. Chapter 4684. Boom! In the Nine Limits formation, the third divine envoy suddenly appeared. A terrifying aura of thunder and lightning filled the surroundings, forming a sea of lightning in the sky. Nie Tian, who was already under the pressure of the two envoys, felt the pressure on his head skyrocket, causing his body to tremble. He could sense that the auras of the 17 envoys were not simply merging, but stacking on top of one another, which was too much for him to handle. Besides, the power of the lightning that the third envoy had unleashed was extremely ferocious. It charged at his limbs and meridians, causing his blood to boil and burn uncontrollably. Nie Tian, you're indeed a talented cultivator. You're still standing under the combined attack of the three envoys. The third envoy's voice was deep and hoarse. Even though he was astonished, he could not conceal the murderous intent in his voice. He was very surprised that, given Nie Tian's cultivation base, he was able to stand firm against the three divine emissaries. No matter how talented you are, it's useless against the 17 envoys. At the same time, the other envoy spoke. His cold voice was filled with murderous intent. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, a violent force smashed down, causing Nie Tian's body to sink once more. His shoulder blades actually cracked abruptly, causing blood to gush out incessantly and instantly dye his back red. However, he still stood firmly like a mountain. Nice one, you've got guts. One of the sacred envoys could not help but exclaim when he saw this. As an envoy, he knew his partner's strength better than anyone else. Nye Tian, on the other hand, was unfazed by the three sage envoys. His courage was worthy of respect. It's time to end this. However, another voice sounded out almost at the same time. Then, another figure whizzed out like a ray of light and instantly attacked. Puff! The next instant, the rift trembled slightly as a white saber flashed past. Nye Tian's ribs were penetrated, causing blood to pour out. He was covered in blood. Is that all the 17 envoys have? However, it was as if he could not feel the pain. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared like a wild beast. Nye Tian. In the eye of the formation, Qing Ren's expression changed drastically when he saw this, and he exclaimed in shock. He had already expected that Nye Tian would not be able to fight back before the 17 sacred envoys arrived. However, such a tragic scene was something that he had never expected. With 4 sacred envoys attacking at the same time, Nye Tian was already at his limit for being able to resist until now. The terrifying pressure grew stronger and stronger. Nye Tian could even clearly hear the sound of his bones cracking. However, even though his flesh and blood were torn apart and his bones were shattered, his body was like a sharp sword, standing proudly. This scene made the dozen sacred envoys who were watching the battle turn their heads. I originally thought that the most terrifying thing about this kid was his talent that even gods and ghosts couldn't compare to. I never imagined that his willpower would actually be so strong. Yeah, if it wasn't for him, maybe we could have spared his life. Everything in the world has already been decided. We only need to act according to the instructions of the heavenly law divine armament. The sacred envoys discussed in a deep voice. Although they felt it was a pity, they still could not spare Nye Tian's life. At this moment, even under the pressure of the 4 sacred envoys, Nye Tian still did not give in. Nye Tian, since you don't want to die so soon, why don't I show mercy and let you watch a show? On the other side, the sacred envoy who attacked first but was injured by Nye Tian suddenly let out a sinister smile. Then, his figure flickered and he charged toward the eye of the formation. What are you trying to do? Nye Tian's pupils contracted as he roared in a deep voice. I'd like to see how you'll react if you see your own flesh and blood being killed with your own eyes. The sacred envoy chuckled and landed in front of the formation. He reached out an arm from under his black robe. It was a skeletal hand without any flesh and blood. How dare you? Nye Tian let out a thunderous roar as his pupils, which were as deep as 2 abysses, turned scarlet. He did not expect the 17th sacred envoy to be so despicable as to attack Nyefan, who was in the eye of the formation. Haha, the 17th sacred envoy is still so playful. Boss, what the 17th sacred envoy is doing will damage the reputation of the 17th sacred envoy. It doesn't matter. Everyone here today will die anyway. The other sacred envoys had different reactions, but none of them stepped forward to stop him. The 17 sacred envoys whose names shake the heavens are actually so despicable? Qing Ren, who was in the eye of the formation, was sweating profusely and yelling furiously. What a joke! Do you think you have to be upright just because you're powerful? The 17th sacred envoy sneered and reached out his skeletal arm. It passed through the eye of the formation without being hindered by the runes. This, Qing Ren had never thought that the 17th Saint Envoy would have such a terrifying technique. He immediately gasped. Following this, before he could react, a force of nothingness locked him down, and he could not move at all. Lord Divine Envoy, these things are related to my 5 senses. Please don't kill me. Lian Wuni was dumbfounded. She subconsciously took a few steps back and said with a trembling voice. The 17th sacred envoy ignored her. He stared at the unconscious Nyefan with a pair of vicious eyes. Following this, his hands sank and Nyefan was dragged out of the eye of the formation by an invisible force. Asshole! Nyetian let out a roar upon seeing this. At that instant it felt like there was a fireball burning in his body. Kid, I'll let you witness your son die in front of you. The 17th Divine Envoy arrived in front of Nyetian and said in a low voice, his skeletal hand grabbing Nyefan's neck. Don't you dare! Nyetian let out a roar as his aura surged and a strange force surged inside his body. Humph, let's see if I dare. The 17th Sacred Envoy wore a cold grin as he exerted force with his skeletal arm, causing Nyefan's face to turn red. Asshole! Nyetian was infuriated upon seeing this. He let out a roar and unleashed the force in his body, allowing him to break free from the combined pressure of the 4 Sacred Envoys. Bang! The 4 Sacred Envoys were knocked backward. They looked at one another in disbelief as they regained their balance. Nyetian had broken free from the combined pressure of the 4 Sacred Envoys. It was too terrifying. How is this possible? The 17th Sacred Envoy was startled, before he screamed in astonishment. You, stay away from him! Like a ferocious beast, Nyetian let out a furious roar as his aura surged out. Strands of crimson power that looked like fire condensed into terrifying patterns in the air. The force of a primary beast. The 17th Sacred Envoy's eyes widened as he screamed again. He could clearly tell that the force flowing around Nyetian's body was the force of a primary beast.